Director of Public Integrity, Francesca Della Vecchia, Deputy Director of Public Integrity, Alicia Vassell, and Chief Ethics Counsel, Pearl Moore. Today, the committee will consider the Controller's nomination of Wayne Hawley for the reappointment to the Conflict of Interest Board and the Mayor's nomination of Midori Valdivia for the appointment to the position of the Chair of the Taxi and Limousine Commission. We'll begin the nomination of Wayne Hawley for the Conflicts of Interest Board, and we will then hear from Midori Valdivia, and then we will then conclude the public testimony on both candidates. By the letter dated on February 25, 2026, Controller Mark Levine requested advice and consent of the Council regarding the reappointment of Wayne Hawley to the New York City Conflict of Interest Board. The Conflict of Interest Board is an entity that serves to provide clear guidance to public employees regarding the conflict of interest laws, codified in Chapter 68 of the New York City Charter. The board is tasked with achieving this goal through training, education, and the issuance of publication of advisory opinions relating to conduct that may violate the City of Conflict Interest Law. The board also adopts rules to implement and interpret the provisions of the conflict of interest laws. It reviews and adjudicates alleged conflict violations and has the power to impose penalties, including fines of up to $25,000 per violation and suspension or dismissal of the city employees when deemed appropriate. The board also collects and reviews financial disclosure reports. The board consists of 5 members, 3 of whom are appointed by the mayor, 1 appointed by the public advocate, and 1 appointed by the controller. All are subject to the advice and consent of the city council. The mayor must designate one of these members as the chair of the board. The charter states that all members should be chosen for their independence, integrity, civic commitment, and high ethical standards. Board members serve for staggered 6-year terms are prohibited from serving more than 2 consecutive 6-year terms. Board members are required to meet at least once a month and are prohibited from holding public office, seeking election to any public office, being a public employee in any jurisdiction, holding political party office, or appearing as a lobbyist before the city. Board members are entitled to receive compensation in the amount of $250 for each calendar day they perform work for the board. The chair is entitled to $275 per day of service. We are joined today by Wayne Hawley. Mr. Hawley was first appointed to the Conflict of Interest Board by Mayor Bill de Blasio to serve a 6-year term that began on April 1st, 2020, and that will expire on March 31st, 2026. From 1999 to 2017, Mr. Hawley worked at the Conflict of Interest Board, initially as a deputy counsel and later as a deputy executive director and general counsel. From 1983 to 1987, he worked at the MFY Legal Services, rising to level executive director. He also worked at the Queens Legal Services, the American Civil Liberties Union, and in private practice. He received his bachelor's degree from Claremont McKenna College and his law degree from Yale Law School. If appointed to the Conflict of Interest Board by the Controller, Mr. Hawley, a resident of Manhattan, will serve a new 6-year term that will begin on April 1st, 2026 and end on March 31st, 2032. I now recognize the Committee Counsel and administer the affirmation.
Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your statements before this committee and in answer to all council member questions?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hawley. I recognize you to make an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is the speaker on? Again, good afternoon, Chair Ung, Minority Leader Carr, fellow members of the committee. I am Wayne Hawley. I want to begin by possibly making a correction or clearing up a misunderstanding I had. I believe I've been nominated to fill the remaining 2 years of an existing term that will expire on March 31st, 2028. So I'm ending an initial 6 years, as the chair pointed out, from a nomination 6 years ago by Mayor de Blasio. This nomination by Comptroller Levine is to fill a currently vacant term that is set to expire 2 years from now. So I'm going to come in as a pinch hitter, as it were, a late inning substitute, a late game substitute, and fill out that 2 years, which I'm honored to do if confirmed. With that background, I'll make a very short statement and then, of course, be happy to answer any questions. By way of personal background, my wife and I moved to New York City 47 years ago, and we have lived here since. Our 2 children were born and raised here. Our first grandchild was born here and lives here with her parents. Our second grandchild, due in May, will be moving back to the city with his parents by the end of the year, if all goes as planned. So New York City is our home. I care about this city, and I care about its people. I also care about the city's government and the public servants who serve it. I've seen during my time on the board as both board member and staff the important services that these people provide, and have gained an appreciation and respect for the hard work that so many of them do. At the same time, I've also come to appreciate what an outsized role this tiny city agency, the COIB, with 5 board members and fewer than 24 staff, can and indeed do have in a city of 8.5 million people and around 300,000 city employees. The COIB is both a symbol of and one of the drivers of the commitment of city government to put public service first. That is, to the principle that the public service is a public trust. If I'm again confirmed by the council, I will have the opportunity to continue to serve the board as a member, as I said, for the next 2 years. I'll be mindful of the mission of the board to promote the public's trust in city government, and also mindful of my own obligation in interpreting and enforcing the laws that the board is charged to oversee, to put the public's interests first. I look forward to that continued responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. I also like to recognize Deputy Speaker Williams and Councilmember Banks. I will start with a question. How does the ability of elected officials to control the COIB's budget affect its mission and independence?
Well, whether it in fact does, and I can say that it's not been that experience that anything of the sort happens, but it's true that the public could be led to believe, or there is at least a potential of perception that because the board has before it the often matters involving the very branches of government that set its budget, that the board will be influenced by that. Perhaps understandable, if slightly cynical perception. So for that reason, the board, for over the years, not because of the fact of undue influence, but the perception that might be there, has sought an independent budget. That's not been successful. The matter has been before a few charter revision commissions, the Campaign Finance Board, the Independent Budget Office have some sort of budget protection in their government papers. The board does not as yet.
Thank you. And your pre-hearing questions, you opined on critical staffing shortages at the COIB. For the benefit of everyone here, could you describe those staffing needs?
Yes, the board, as my questions answers the council's questions indicated, the board had 26 staff at the beginning of the administration. I'm sorry, the Adams administration. So 4 years ago, 26. The board's down to 20 employees now. 2 positions are particularly critical, and I'm happy to report that one of those has been resolved since my writing. That was for an attorney position in the enforcement unit. The other position in the annual disclosure unit has not been filled. And the problem there had been, and this is a problem, as I pointed out also in my answer, that suggests that budget protection is not a perfect answer to all problems. You could have a budget, but not have the ability to hire people, if only because the personnel actions hadn't been acted on in time. And that unfortunately has been the experience with these two positions. There have been offers made, offers accepted, good candidates, but they couldn't wait for the paperwork to be approved in the process, and they had to take other jobs. Happily, we got the approval for one of them, had a candidate, another candidate in mind, and knock wood, that person will start in the next couple of weeks.
Well, that's great to hear. So what else will you ask the council to do respect to the COIB budget this year?
I'm not aware of any items at the moment. I'll say historically, and this goes back to when there were significant cuts in the wake of the September 11th and the budget crisis that came in with a new mayor, and many will recall that on the one hand, property taxes went up. On the other hand, there were cuts across city agencies. The council stepped up then and helped staff positions. Those, of course, were not baselined, and so they were year-to-year positions. I don't think we're in that crisis period now, but that would be a possible avenue for the board to consider if things got that dire. It's tough to hire people for a year, and what, as I recall, happened, the council was good enough in a second year and possibly even a third year to give another year, and then ultimately the city's budget position approved, and at least some of those positions got baselined. But that's another example for which even 25 years later, we remain grateful.
Would you agree with the general statement that whether a public servant qualifies for legal representation by the law department is dependent on whether they're accused of doing something that is consistent with their duties as a public servant?
That seems to be the standard, although the board has no involvement in those determinations. That's a law department, city hall determination.
In your opinion, as a lawyer who has served as general counsel of COIB, is a violation of Chapter 68 an act that's consistent with any public servant's duties?
Well, an allegation that they did it is only that. But if there was consideration given to the possibility that the city might decide to represent somebody charged by the board with a violation, and that is the law department itself was going to do that, that I think would run into, in effect, legal conflicts of interest, professional responsibility conflicts of interest kind of issues, because the law department's also our lawyer, that is the board's lawyer, so that if, for example, we've successfully prosecuted a enforcement proceeding through the Office of Hearings and Appeals, we've imposed a public disposition, the respondent, losing public servant, can run an Article 78. The law department represents us in the Article 78, so it can't very well be the board's lawyer and the respondent's lawyer. Whether the law department could choose to provide paid private counsel under that standard for somebody accused of violation is something beyond certainly my level of expertise. I will point out that many respondents, that is, people who are charged with violations by the board, are represented by their union counsel. Sometimes even former city employees are represented by their union counsel, and some, albeit not a majority of respondents, choose to hire their own private counsel. So there's considerable representation, but not complete representation.
Thank you. And lastly on this topic, in your pre-hearing questions, you wrote that the notions of fairness suggest that people appearing before the COIB should be provided with counsel. Do you believe this is true in all cases, or are there times when individuals should be responsible for their own representation?
I think we in this country understand the value. I mean, lawyers don't always get the greatest name in the world, except when you need one badly, and I think there's a certain fairness to that. There's certainly that in the criminal law proceeding. The city has extended right to counsel in a variety of areas. I'm not sure this would be on the top of the list, but fairness is fairness. Some of this though is budget and labor and employment matters that are really beyond my level of expertise, particularly the budget matter.
I do have more questions, but I'm going to pass it on to other council members. Councilmember Banks?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations on your nomination,
Thank you.
Mr. Howie. Uh, New York City has several oversight entities, including the Department of Investigations, the Inspector General, the Council's Committee on Oversight and Investigations, and along with other watchdog bodies. How do you believe the conflict of interest board should coordinate with these entities while still maintaining a level of independence?
It's a good question. Thank you. The part of that is written into the charter, and it's actually worked quite well. The board does not conduct its own investigations. Our staff is not budgeted for, and hasn't historically had them because the charter charges the Department of Investigation to conduct investigations on our behalf. And I think that the notion behind that is because many of these investigations begin one way and maybe end up going another way, a lot of things come out, and
Right.
things may come out that are simply disciplinary and get referred back to the employee in question's superiors. Some of them may have a criminal law implication. Those get referred to prosecutors. Some of them, maybe the ones that didn't even begin that way, have a conflict of interest thing. DOI is thought to be the appropriate place to handle them all so that you don't have investigators from 3 or 4 different places bumping into each other and potentially interfering with more important investigations. So the board regularly refers complaints that it receives
Right.
to the DOI. The DOI reports back. Department of Investigation gets complaints that we've never heard of, and when they reveal a conflict of interest issue, reports back to us about those, and that's worked well.
All right, thank you. You've spent many of your years working at the Conflict of Interest Board, including serving as a deputy counsel, later on as the deputy executive director and general counsel. From your perspective, how has the board evolved over the years, and what lessons from that experience will guide your approach if you are privileged to be appointed again
Thank you.
or confirmed?
Thank you. I think I think a lot of the growing pains, and this entity was created in 1990 as a result of the big charter review process in the late 80s that made the council the body that it is today,
Right.
and did away with the Board of Estimate. A lot of growing pains took place then. The board had not had enforcement authority prior to that, and I think particularly in the enforcement area, the board had to learn that new process, that new responsibility, and develop patterns, habits, and sort of rules of the road, and that took. Probably it was still growing on when I came onto the board 8 or 9 years later. It had matured considerably since then. It had been staffed up since then. But I think that need to blend really two roles about, I'm not talking about annual disclosure so much, but about the conflict of interest law itself, Chapter 68 of the Charter.
Yeah.
On the one hand, we're the place to go where if you want some advice, we're also the place to go if you, either because you didn't listen to our advice or you just didn't think about it and you do appear to have violated the law, we're going to punish you. And to make those two things fit together well is a challenge, and I think the board has done a good job with that. But it's always evolving, and part of the evolution is the fact that you've got these
Right.
staggered terms and board members come and go, and that's worked well too. You've seen a variety of perspectives, a variety of different kinds of people.
Thank you for your response. And my last question. Serving on the Conflict of Interest Board requires a strong commitment to impartiality and maintaining public trust, which is so important. What motivates you personally to continue serving in this role, and how do you approach that responsibility?
Well, to be candid, I do enjoy the work, and I find it interesting. I find city government interesting, and I have a lot of respect for the people who work there and the people who are on the board, let me put it this way. I don't have any trouble being a straight shooter. I call him like I see him. I'm honored to have been nominated by Mayor de Blasio. I'm honored to be nominated now by Comptroller Levine. But everybody that comes before me is going to be the same, whoever appointed me.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We also been joined by Majority Leader Abreu, and now I'd like to turn it over to Minority Leader Carr for his questions.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Hawley, good to see you. Thank you for coming before us today.
Happy to.
I want to just double down on the question my colleague just asked you about impartiality. Obviously, everybody comes to their role in government with a lifetime of views and well-developed and passionately believed in. I'm sure you're no exception to that. And so, but there's a diversity of opinion in this city, from left to right. And I just want you to expound a little bit about, how you feel you would be able to sort of check your own well-developed views at the door when folks come before you who may come from a different perspective.
Let me offer my experience, and this is perhaps even more the case over the last 5-6 years now, that we've had the board has had appointees both from the comptroller and the public advocate, as well as only the mayor. The notion of who appointed somebody has never been reflected in any way, in any kind of favor, in any kind of flavor. The notion of who appointed somebody, frankly, never really crosses anybody's mind. The board and the people on the work at the board and the people who serve the board, serve as members of the board, I think owe their loyalty to that institution and to the city, to all the people of the city, and to treat everybody alike. Now, do some people vote for somebody and some people vote for somebody else? I have no idea who people voted for, or really even, I don't want to be naive, because I guess some people's political party, but I don't know that for a fact about many of the people who've been on that board over the years. We certainly respect the diversity of the city, and people will have different views, but really, it's an apolitical body, is I think the best way I can put it. It's meant to be, in something that some people suggest not all courts can always do, not all adjudicative bodies can do, but I think the board has done a pretty good job about that. I was appointed by Mayor de Blasio. I was on the board during the period of time when we ended up with a disposition that is causing now the former mayor to make quarterly payments of about $15,000 on a very significant amount that he owes the city. I didn't have any trouble exercising my responsibility in that regard.
Appreciate your answer. Apolitical, that's the magic word I think we were all looking for. So well said.
I got you, Mark.
So with respect to some other questions, I had asked your now new colleague, Mr. Lafredo, this question as well. COIB operated what I thought was one of the most engaging social media presences on what was then known as Twitter and now X. And then, for whatever reason, that social media account ceased to be active or disappeared. Obviously, education about the conflicts of interest law is one of COIB's core responsibilities, and it's one that it's done very well over the years. It's something I think we should see return, because X is a well-trafficked platform. Is that something you'd agree with, something you'd look into, and could you shed any light onto why that changed, given your long history at COIB?
Yeah, I happened to see that exchange with Mr. Lafredo, and I won't, I'll plead as he did, but I will not, I will also answer the question, but I'll preface it as he did by expressing a lack of complete familiarity with Twitter and its current incarnation. I think that may have happened when I was not on the board. In any case, there was a little bit of a flight from Twitter at that time, and we valued. I'm talking about in the aughts, certainly into the second decade of the century. Not everything about that train education unit. Stellar, and I think reaches people in a lot of ways, and that's important. So whether that's a decision that needs to be reversed, I'd at the very least commit to urging my fellow board members to go back to staff and say, think about this one, and is it maybe time to go back to the former Twitter, now back to X?
Yeah, I think the point you made about the training unit kind of going where they need to go, you meet people where they are.
Yep.
And social media is no different. So I think that's a decision worth revisiting, and I appreciate your commitment to having that discussion. And my last question is with respect to establishing a schedule of fines and penalties. I know this is a much talked about topic, and there's some discussion about whether or not over the course of time, over a great different matters that share some characteristics but are different in other ways. Right? No case is ever the same per se, but there are strong similarities that I think should breed some level of consistency. Do you think that that there should be such an establishment of schedules and fines to ensure that consistency? And if not, why not? And would you commit to some sort of an inventory of the board's decisions over the years to ensure that there is some level of consistency over like cases?
I'm reluctant to commit to anything terribly exhaustive, but I will say this. First of all, let me be candid. I don't think a schedule is a particularly good idea. I think the federal sentencing guidelines have proven not to be successful, and they're probably the need for consistency there is perhaps much more understandable where you've got, I don't know the number of federal district judges there are in the country, or even federal districts there are in the country, but dozens and dozens of different geographic locations, all that. You're talking about one body here that doesn't hear that many cases a year. And in every case where a fine is being set, there's discussion about what the appropriate fine ought to be. And these are mostly settlements, and the staff will come back with a settlement number, but that's only after the case has been first before the board, and the board will say, okay, we've seen the cases you've cited, we get a sense of that. What are the comparable cases? What's the number? And if the number doesn't seem right within those cases, we're going to say that's a little bit too high, a little bit too low, considering an awful lot of circumstances. And I think that's really the problem, is I think ensuring people that we've thought about a variety of factors, not just cases that look kind of on the threshold, on first appearances, somewhat similar, but you've got aggravating circumstances, you've got mitigating circumstances. And the board, and I have committed to this, that I will strongly recommend to the fellow board members and through them to staff that they put out a list of those mitigating and aggregating factors, which will cause two cases, and you're correct, that otherwise, somebody no, I don't want to give an example, but conduct that looks similar, but the fines were different. But as in fact reflected in 80 or 90% of those settlements that we publish, there'll be a list of what caused the board to make it higher or lower, and a list of those can and should be made public.
Yeah, I think that's a wise step, because I think sometimes, and I read those settlements when they come out, like it pings a memory of something you read in the past, and you're sort of at a loss as to why this could have been treated differently. And I think having a sense of what happens in the black box of the decision-making process and then gets put out there, I think would give folks a better understanding of why there might be these differences.
It is a black box, but we try, and we could possibly try better to open it up to the degree we're permitted by law to do.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So in December, DOI published a report titled "Report on the New York City Conflict of Interest Board's Advisory Opinion and Moonlighting Waivers Practices." You recognize this report?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
It's the one that, yes.
Okay. So according to DOI, COIB has created an exception to Chapter 68's moonlight provisions, allowing city attorneys to represent organizations that do business with the city as long as no actual conflict of interest exists in the representation. What is the rationale for this attorney exception to the anti-moonlight provisions of Chapter 68?
Yeah, that assumes a conclusion I think is not quite
Okay.
either what that opinion said, and if that report said, if it did, it's not quite fair. The matter in question, and I don't feel comfortable going too much into the specifics about that matter. There might have been a little bit of disagreement between the Department of Investigation, who are our friends and colleagues in city government, and us about an application of a particularly narrow piece of the law. But there's no attorney exception. To get really wonky about it, the definition of position is a little opaque, in part because it begins with a position is a position, and then it goes on from there. You might say it's not the most felicitous of draftsmanship, but from there, and this is, let me just say this. We respect and appreciate DOI. We respect what DOI's thoughts were when it issued that particular part of the report, and it caused us to reflect on whether they have a point. That said, the issue, to suggest there's been a change would suggest that a lot of these matters come before the board. They don't. So the next time one does, and that may not be for a year or 2 or 3 years, but we'll certainly have to think carefully about this when and if that comes up again.
Okay, appreciate that answer. What is your position on DI's recommendation that COIB formalizes via rulemaking its position that outside attorneys are not subject to Chapter 68 moonlighting restrictions?
Yeah. Well, people with, all city employees are governed by the conflicts of interest law, and you're no less subject to it because you have an outside practice of law. So there's no need to, if the suggestion is we should publish an opinion that they're not subject, we would never publish such an opinion because they are subject to the conflict of interest law. So the question is, in what way are they a subject? And we've yeah, I think that's enough said.
Okay, different line of questioning. According to DOI, COIB has taken the position that advisory opinions are entirely protected from disclosure, even though Chapter 68 explicitly provides that the board is required to publish its advisory opinions with personally identifying information redacted. What's the legal basis for COIB's position?
Well, what the charter calls for is for board decisions to be published, but with identifying all identifying characteristics redacted, and the board respects that. What that means, though, is that there may be an underlying letter which is private to a public servant in question, but but that a public opinion should be issued to alert the public to what that decision was, to do it in a way that does not identify the public servant involved. And because of that, the board has already issued 2 advisory opinions this year in response to that recommendation from DOI. So we're taking it seriously, and we'll continue to do so.
Okay. So some will argue that bad actors can exploit the confidentiality of advisory guidance by mischaracterizing the guidance they receive when questioned by the press. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, bad actors can do a lot of things. It's possible. It's regrettable, but I, for one, always wonder if something like that occurs, why the person in question isn't called out, if that's suspected by the press, by the public. Let us see the letter. Why not? Let us see the letter. But that's an editorial on my part.
Okay, the State Commission on Ethics and Lobbying and Government has the power to release unredacted information about guidance requested and the advice given whether the recipient of such advice engages in misleading, inaccurate, or incomplete public disclosure of such information. Do you think the COIB should have this power?
It's a good question because it suggests that, in my mind, it's almost a waiver situation, not a waiver of the right of confidentiality. Have you waived your right of confidentiality if you go talking about the opinion, whether it's mischaracterized or not? Good question. I suppose if it's mischaracterized, this gets tough, because what's a mischaracterization and which is just a slightly more favorable reading than not. You'd be surprised if somebody who had a letter that was generally favorable went out of their way, though, to emphasize maybe anything negative in it, as opposed to the generally positive outcome. So anybody who gets a letter that's generally favorable is going to talk about the favorable stuff. I don't know. These are tough, and I really haven't thought about it.
Last question on this topic. Mayor Adams reversed a de Blasio-era policy that encouraged City Hall officials to publicly disclose their COIB guidance, claiming that public servants are not allowed to release the guidance they receive because it's protected under the lawyer-client privilege. Based on your understanding of the city charter, can public servants voluntarily disclose the guidance they receive from the COIB?
I know of no obstacle in doing that. I've always been of the view that if you get what is otherwise a private communication from us, that would include private advice to members of the council and any other public servant of the city, that the recipient is free to disclose those as he or she wishes.
Thank you, and thank you for the answers of the questions. We also have been joined by Council Member Lee, and any other members? Any questions? Okay, thank you. I appreciate you coming here today.
Thank you so much.
Seeing no other members who have questions, Mr. Harley, you're excused, and Ms. Valdiva, I invite you to join us at the witness table. Yes, sorry. Yes. The New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission, known as the TLC, was created pursuant to Local Law 12 of 1971, with the goal of developing and improving taxi and limousine service in New York City. The TLC is responsible for the overall transportation policy with respect to for-hire vehicle. The Commission establishes certain rates, standards, and criteria for the licensing of vehicles, drivers, chauffeurs, owners, and operators. The Commission includes 9 members appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of the council. The TLC must include at least 1 member from each borough. TLC members are appointed for a term of 7 years and can serve until the appointment and qualification of a successor. The mayor designates 1 TLC member to act as the chair and the chief executive officer. The chair has the power to employ, assign, and oversees the officers and employee of organization. Pursuant to the charter, the chair's position is full-time and the mayor sets compensation. The chair currently receives $243,171 annually. No other TLC members receives compensation. By the letter dated February 13th and pursuant to Section 31 and 2301 of the Charter, Mayor Madani submitted the name of Midori Valdivia for the Council advice and consent to appoint her as a member of the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission and to serve as the chair and the CEO of the commission. Since 2022, Ms. Valdivia has been a member of the board of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and from 2018 to 2020, she serves as the chief of staff to the chair and CEO of the MTA. In those roles, she has orchestrated MTA's roles in passing congestion pricing, championed the free bus pilot project, oversaw the MTA's $20 billion annual budget. At the same time, she has also operated her own consulting firm, which provides transportation advisory and not-for-profit management services. From 2015 to 2018, Ms. Valdivia has served as a Deputy Commissioner for Finance and Administration as Assistant Commissioner for Finance Operations of the Taxi and Limousine Commission. From 2008 to 2015, she worked in various roles of the Port Authority in New York and New Jersey. She has been on the board of the Regional Plan Association. She received her bachelor's degrees from Penn State University and master's in Public Affairs and Urban and Regional Planning from Princeton University. If appointed by the mayor, she will serve a remainder of the 7-year term that will expire on January 31st, 2031. I now recognize the committee council to administer the affirmation.
Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in all your statements before this committee and in answer to all council member questions?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Ms. Valdivia, I now recognize you to make an opening statement.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madame Ung and members of the Rules, Privileges, Elections, Standards, and Ethics Committee. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Midori Valdivia, and I'm honored that Mayor Mamdani has nominated me to serve as Chair and Commissioner of the Taxi and Limousine Commission, the TLC. Let me start by acknowledging why I'm here. Transportation is opportunity. For nearly 180,000 drivers, it's how they earn a living and support their families. For millions of New Yorkers, it's access to jobs, healthcare, and education. For passengers with disabilities, it can be true independence. But here's what I've learned. Opportunity doesn't just happen. We have to define what kind of system creates it and for whom, and build the infrastructure to make that real. As an immigrant, as a Latina, I've lived this truth with my family across 3 countries. My family immigrated from Peru to Japan, where I grew up in Osaka. I watched little kids run errands because the streets were designed to be safe. Public transit was designed with a vision that everyone participates in society. Then we immigrated to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I saw what happens when you don't have that vision every day, when transportation can reflect inequality instead of opportunity. And that taught me the systems we build are choices we make, not inevitabilities we accept. I spent over 15 years at that intersection of transportation and opportunity. At the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, more than a decade ago, I saw TLC drivers waiting all day for just one or two fares. There, I had the opportunity to partner with labor leaders who led the fight for the first wage standards for airport service workers. As Chief of Staff for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, a 70,000-strong agency, I aligned the right people on major infrastructure initiatives, such as improving subway countdown clocks and the launch of Omni, MTA's contactless payment system. And I worked with a large team to shepherd congestion pricing on behalf of the MTA through state legislation, understanding that dependable transit requires sustainable transit. Like TLC drivers, I don't like traffic. No one does, and it was a meaningful way to better our streets. At TLC, I was Deputy Commissioner of Finance and Administration. I helped build the first of its kind accessible wheelchair program using driver incentives that worked. I contributed to the first driver pay study for for-hire vehicles, and I led TLC's first engagement with national regulators on predatory lending practices targeting small medallion owners. Back then, I was reacting to tech companies, to debt, to complaints, instead of asking, what kind of system do we want? One where drivers can work with dignity, economic sustainability, or one where they're trapped? So I'm answering that question now. Today, TLC regulates nearly a little under 1 million trips a day. That's comparable to an entire transit system of a major American city. The agency is key to how New Yorkers get to work, healthcare, and opportunity. That's our current role. And it builds on our founding mission of 1971, protect passengers and drivers by setting safety standards and taxi rates. Today, the threat looks a little different. Algorithmic platforms that control workers without transparency, extracting value without accountability, and stifling competition. The mission hasn't changed. Protect people from exploitation, but who needs protection and from what? That's evolving, and so must we. In the next few years, TLC will answer questions that shape transportation for a generation. How do we protect hundreds of thousands of workers when the market is disrupted or changed? How do we ensure that platforms that use our public streets serve the public good? Those answers won't just determine New York's future. They'll set standards for cities across this country. And that's the opportunity and the responsibility in front of us. I want a transportation system where professional drivers have professional working conditions and economic security, not just to survive, but an ability to build wealth and thrive, and trips that are affordable and truly accessible for the passengers who rely on them. That every New Yorker can access our services, regardless of ability or zip code, and that technology that serves the public good with transparent rules, fair competition, accountability to passengers, drivers, and ultimately our great city. That's Mayor Mamdani's vision, and it's my vision. We came to this through our own experiences. He through organizing with drivers, me through over 15 years of building transportation teams, policies, and systems, and now we get to build it together. Here are my 3 priorities and the ways I'll address them. First, driver dignity and passenger dignity. Economic infrastructure and support resources for drivers. Here's what I mean. Expanding the Medallion Debt Relief Program. Catching violations before workers have to file complaints. A comprehensive penalty review since 2016, because workers, many of them immigrants like my family, deserve economic security and not outdated practices. Second, clear standards for corporate accountability and enforcement. TLC should enforce the rules on the books to protect both passengers and drivers. And TLC should set standards before deploying new technology with verified safety data, driver support, and accessibility on day one. Third, a transportation system that works together. TLC regulates 1/4 of all public transportation trips in the city, so we must work together as part of this larger transportation system. That means bringing in a taxi driver's perspective on bus lanes, penalties, training them on the rules, for example. Riders don't just experience taxis or buses as separate systems, they just need to get somewhere. And our riders deserve that. One city, one transportation system. I bring both professional expertise and an understanding to this role. My expertise spans bus, subway, aviation, shared mobility. I've served on various boards. And as an immigrant, as a Latina, as a mom, as a transit wife, I understand what's at stake when transportation determines opportunity, not just as policy, but as lived experience. My husband worked every single day during COVID as an essential MTA worker, all while I was pregnant. I've watched him over the years navigate workers' compensation issues, struggle to get bathroom breaks because the system was delayed, even with crew rooms and lockers. Taxi drivers and for-hire vehicle drivers, they have nowhere to go. That's what drives me. I worked to build a yellow taxi wheelchair accessible fleet alongside a formidable disability advocacy coalition to reach 50% accessibility, and the TLC has done it. So I know what that change means for my neighbors who rely on these taxis to move freely. I know many of you have fought and continue to fight for the vision of accessibility and driver dignity that I shared, for debt relief, for transparent wages, for resources, for better conditions. Thank you. I want to be a partner in this work. I'm grateful to the TLC team who have maintained this agency's commitment to serving New Yorkers. Our mission has always been clear: set standards for this industry, and the team has done that. So we're not changing TLC's core mission, but we are doubling down on who we protect and what we protect them from. And together, we'll build on the foundation the TLC has maintained, evolving it for the transportation landscape we face today. The choice isn't between innovation and regulation. It's between letting others define our future or defining it ourselves as a government. Transportation determines who has opportunity. TLC can ensure everyone does. And that's my vision. I'm asking for your partnership to make it real. Thank you so much. The City Council has always been a major partner to TLC in appointing commissioners and collaborating on legislation. I'm ready for your questions to answer about my vision for TLC and the work we can accomplish together.
Thank you for your testimony. We are also now joined by Councilmember Krishnan. You just testified that 50% of all yellow cabs are now wheelchair accessible. So based on experience, what challenges does TLC face in the effort to make more taxis more accessible for all?
Thank you so much. So as you may know, there was a settlement reached with the City of New York around 50% yellow taxi wheelchair accessibility. I believe it's really about service. So the fleet is out there, it is working, but we have to make sure that we're putting the right incentives to make sure that our taxi drivers are fully compensated for the time, effort, but also we need to do further training to ensure and really build bridges among these communities, because every person deserves transportation and every person deserves to be seen. I think there's a little bit of work to go, to do there. I'm excited to dive in. I know one of the concerns that the disability advocates do have is around accessible dispatch. There was a end of an accessible dispatch program that TLC, helped to finalize. So that's something I'm going to be looking into, because service really matters. It's not just about whether the cars are on the road.
Thank you. Disability advocates argue that the entire yellow cab fleet should be wheelchair accessible so that drivers can't ignore anyone hailing a cab. Do you support this mandate?
I think that's something I'm excited to dive into. As you may know, when I was deputy commissioner of the TLC, I actually led the accessible program. And so I understand where disability advocates and people with disabilities are coming from. At the same time, I learned about the high prices of wheelchair accessible vehicles. So I know how that can be a burden to our small businesses, to drivers. And so maybe this is something where we really have to start thinking about what does government need to do to think about closing this gap. So that's something I'm excited to dive into and learn more about.
Do you support mandating that all yellow cabs be electric?
Well, I think in theory, yes, right? I mean, we love electric vehicles. We should have electric vehicles on the road. I also want to be cognizant of where we are in our charging infrastructure journey in the city of New York. The last thing I would want is a customer going into a taxi, and because there might have not been charging infrastructure available, maybe the person doesn't get to the end of their trip. That really matters. So I really care about kind of transportation operations. So I'm excited to dive into that. Believe that there's also been thinking about universal design as it relates to electric vehicles in the long term. So, of course, these products are changing. At the same time, I want to ensure part of the cost model of being a taxi driver and a for-hire vehicle driver, these costs are high. I don't think anyone's surprised that gas prices are going up. I believe this week or last week, there was prominent articles about the cost of vehicles. So I want to take that into account to understand what kind of model would actually work and serve passengers.
Disability advocates urge that you not mandate electric vehicles unless you simultaneously mandate wheelchair accessibility. What is your position on these goals?
I think, again, it's been a while since I've been at the TLC, so I'm really excited to dive into these issues. I believe they do have a point, right? When I talked about standards for deploying new technology in my testimony, I talked about how accessibility should be center. But again, an EV vehicle that's a wheelchair accessible vehicle in today's market is very expensive. So that's going to be top of mind for me. What is that cost model that would actually make the economics work if you're a driver? Why is the burden on the driver or a small business? How do we think about who has the resources in the ecosystem so this can actually be affordable? When Mayor Mamdani talks about affordability, I also think he talks about the affordability for people who are working people every single day who are just trying to make a living. So that's just top of mind for me as well. But as a person who's worked on accessibility issues and have learned so much from the disability community, there is something about to do the work we do in policy, and I'm sure you all think this way too, values really matter, right? What do we value? And so I do value the disability community. I mean it when I say I want everybody to be able to access our trips regardless of ability or zip code.
According to the disability advocates, vendors claim that past efforts to approve accessible vehicles seem designed to prevent competition. Are you aware of these complaints, and do they have any merit? And if so, how would you modify the approval process?
This is a really great question, and it's something I've actually been really interested in improving vendor pools for transportation agencies in particular. The MTA, that is something I worked on because it made the cost of the thing cheaper, right, when you have more competition. So I'm excited to dive in. I don't know the particularities around this complaint, but I do think competition is a part of how we get there.
The MTA Accessorize program only allows 1% of its users to have access on demand, requiring most users to call a day in advance and to know exactly when they will need to be picked up from and where they're going. What will you do at TLC to provide on-demand access to wheelchair accessible for hire vehicles to all New Yorkers who qualify for Accessorize?
I love this question because when I was both at the TLC and at the MTA, I'm proud to have been a leader in developing and supporting and championing what we're calling this on-demand program, where you can get within on-demand Accessorize trips in the form of for-hire vehicles and taxis. So I'm really proud of the work I did there, and I would be interested in expansion of the program.
That's great. I do have more questions, but I'm going to pass it on to my fellow council members. Councilmember Banks?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations on your nomination. When it comes to, when we talk about affordability, we can't leave out a taxi pay and benefits. And with the high volume for higher services, like Uber and Lyft. They tend to get most of the attention these days. I wanted to focus on the taxi drivers for a minute. The city and state have worked very hard over the past decade to make sure that the FHV drivers are treated fairly, and they have free health care, vision through the Black Car Fund. They have paid time off through settlement reached with the AG's office, and they also are paid a fair wage that frequently is adjusted and accounts for expenses. But taxi drivers have not seen a lot of these improvements. The only raises they've gotten was in the past 10 years was back in 2022 when fares were bumped to about 23%. But inflation went up almost double. I want to know, and listen, I know the mayor cares a lot about taxi drivers. Have you spoken to the mayor about this?
I've had broad conversations about what is possible and what is exciting in terms of what we can deliver for New Yorkers in this industry, both passengers and drivers. In particular, with the yellow taxi industry and the drivers, I am, proud to have met with taxi drivers in preparation for this council hearing. I think it's so important not just to listen, but then to follow through. And so I have heard the variety of concerns around livable wages. I think there's an opportunity here around livable wages. I think there is an opportunity around reducing burdens for drivers within our TLC rulebook.
Right.
But I am excited to work on these issues. And yes, when I talk about TLC drivers, I mean yellow taxi drivers, for-hire vehicle drivers, commuter vans, commuter van drivers, and paratransit drivers. So this is something I'm really excited to work on.
Thank you. 10 years ago, the TLC undertook an initiative to ensure healthcare access for taxi drivers. Do you know why the TLC has not pursued similar efforts for the years since?
So I'm happy to be corrected. I remember I was at the TLC when I believe the court system struck it down and
Right.
said the TLC was not allowed to move forward on it, and I had to work on the refunds for the health care. I believe it was 6 or 9 cents. But this is exactly what I'm talking about. When I think about what drivers need, when we support the people that power transportation systems, and I have learned this time and time again in subways, bus, rail, aviation, when we support the system, support the people that power the system, the whole system gets better. So I do think all drivers should get benefits. I think they should be able to access healthcare. I think they should be able to access retirement benefits.
Right.
So these are issues I'm really excited to work
So,
on.
so we have your commitment to work on those issues.
Yes, as long as, and I would love to work with you all on how to navigate as it relates to the court system, because I believe that it was struck down. But I'm happy to come back to you on that.
All right, thank you for your response. When it comes to financial security and going back to healthcare for drivers, what additional policies would the city and state or should consider should the city and state consider improving long-term financial stability for drivers across the industry?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question again?
What additional policies should the city and state consider improving long-term financial stability for the drivers across the industry?
Great. I think one thing that we should start putting on the table and thinking about is really looking at, we've set minimum driver pay rules in the for-hire vehicle industry. We do have a metered fare in the yellow taxi industry, but what does it really take to live in New York and be a taxi driver and be a for-hire vehicle driver? I think that merits analysis and discussion, a robust discussion. Like I said before, to me, it's the fact that these drivers have spent, and when you go to other cities, somebody will maybe take up a for-hire vehicle, like trip and maybe be on these app companies, for, let's see, for like a summer gig or something to do on the side to supplement their income. In New York City, these drivers, this is what they do. They've been doing it for 20 years, 30 years, some, thankfully, 6 years, 7 years. I met a taxi driver the other day who was on the job for 2 years. It is difficult to hear stories when people have been doing this for 25 years and they're like, the day I quit my job is the day I have nothing. And so I think retirement benefits is definitely something long-term that the city and state could collaborate on.
Thank you. And as New York City integrates Google's autonomous Waymo vehicles, currently as a pilot program, into our transit ecosystem, how can the city prevent a repeat of the Uber effect on existing driver wages?
Thank you for this question. It's a really important one. So I just want to be clear, any bases operating AVs, robo-taxis in a for-hire capacity, they will have to be licensed by TLC. Right now, as it relates to the testing program, the state law only allows testing for driverless vehicles. And that's it, right? I think what I want to really pivot TLC to is a agency that is much more proactive than perhaps in the past. So proactively setting standards for an autonomous vehicle network will be key. There will be some questions and policy areas that I really care about, and I will work closely with the Department of Transportation because they are the holder of the pilot program for New York City. But people, drivers, and passengers will always be at the center of this framework. It has to be. New York City is for people. It's not for machines. It's not for just things on the road to be on the road, right? And so New York City is for people. And so some things I will care about is worker protection, impact on transportation system, the whole system, pedestrians, buses, making sure ambulances still have free passage and easy passage on our streets. I will care about congestion, and I believe the commission will too. Anything that exacerbates traffic is probably not something we all want to embrace so quickly. And this might sound a little wonky, but I'm really gonna care about data transparency. I think that's really important, but people and the workforce of this industry, like I said, when you support the workforce that powers the system, the transportation system, the system gets better. And so drivers and passengers will always be at the heart of this.
Thank you for your responses. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'd now like to pass it to Councilmember Encarnacion.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And welcome and congratulations. I actually, my dad drove yellow cabs when I was a little girl. I had no idea that there were people in rooms like this talking about his profession, but here we are. And so I wanted to touch on a few things, and I'm thankful to Councilmember Banks for touching on Waymo. It was one of my questions, and I know that you mentioned being data-driven about those conversations. Can you expand a little bit on exactly what kind of data points would you be looking at when you're thinking about that program specifically?
Yeah, first, I would want to understand more deeply what data the Department of Transportation is collecting because they are the holder of the pilot program, and to assess if that data meaningfully tells us things about the its impact on the TLC economy. We're kind of our own economy, right? We're talking about almost 1 million trips a day. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so I think beyond just a technical, how does the vehicle work, in terms of that, I will really care about safety. I am thankful that I've worked in the transportation industry for close to 20 years. And so I've been able to have conversations informally and formally with California regulators to understand kind of their lessons learned around the introduction of AVs. Another thing I'm really interested in relates to the impact on the economy is how would the model work as it relates to impact potentially on wages, traffic speeds, How do they maneuver in potential emergency situations? As you can imagine, and I'm sure your father knows better than both of us, how complex the New York City streetscape is, right? So many people are using the street at the same time. And so I do want to honor that complexity when we dive into the data.
Thank you. I also serve as the chair of immigration. So my question to you, and thank you for sharing about your background and your upbringing. Many of the drivers and the immigrant drivers in this industry, my concern with them is understanding what kind of specific policies you would pursue to support those drivers moving forward, especially with what they're facing on a day-to-day basis and now under the federal government, right? And so I really am interested in seeing how you look to expand the support there and what are some of the ideas that you have, if any.
Yeah, thank you so much, Council Member. This is an issue that's really close to my heart because of course, I immigrated to the United States, and I know what communities that I'm close to are going through, and the communities that I'm a part of are going through. I am so incredibly proud that I believe over 90% of our drivers and our licensees are from immigrant communities. I think that is just as New York as it gets. I am committed to protecting the safety of TLC licensed drivers, and I think this administration really cares about collaboration. So I'm already thinking about how do we collaborate with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. I know there's already been some kind of collaboration, but I want to be able to bring resources to where the drivers are. I think about that with the Mayor's Office of People with Disabilities as well. Immigrants do not live one issue lives, and so there's a lot of intersectionality here. I also think in particular, the approach I want to bring is a listening approach. So much of the privilege I feel about being in this space is that every day I hope to hear the stories of drivers and passengers experiencing our system. And I want the TLC staff to hear that as well, and I know many of them do. And so that's really going to be important to me. I'm interested in enhancing these collaborations amongst the other departments and offices. But moreover, I really want to listen. I do not pretend that I know all the answers. There's a complex, diverse, incredible community of people that we have the honor to regulate and engage. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Great. And my last question is a two-part question. The first part is a yes or no,
Okay.
and then I'll expand a little bit with a follow-up. Are you familiar with the findings of the New York City Livery Task Force report?
I am familiar with the task force, and I think I recently got a copy of that report. Yes.
Okay, so it outlines several challenges, obviously facing our livery and black car sector, including the long-term impacts of the 2018 vehicle cap, the loss of both vehicles and drivers, from everything from small immigrant-owned businesses that serve transportation deserts in particular. It also includes recommendations for that sector. What thoughts do you have on addressing some of those issues, and are there any of those recommendations that particularly speak to you?
So I'm excited to dive in on this issue. I believe strongly that they're in the livery business, which are such incredible pillars of their own community and provide such critical access to healthcare, education, transportation hubs that might not be easy to get to. So I understand how critical they are to our communities. And the feedback I've been hearing is that we are regulating, multi-billion-dollar corporations similar to the way we might be regulating liveries because they are in the black car industry. I don't think that should be the case. I think there should be differentiation, and I'm excited to dive into that. And I know about the livery task force, and this is something that I have had the privilege of talking to the Livery Base Owners Association about.
I appreciate that. I mean, obviously, in transportation deserts, this is how people get around. They really strongly depend on that. But even in communities that are very dense in transportation alternatives, this is important as well. I thank you.
you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee?
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Okay, so first I wanted to start off, and it seems like this is a popular topic because Deputy Speaker was here, and she had just wanted me to ask about, which I think she has spoken to you about the autonomous vehicles and just your thoughts on that. Because I know that when you talk about the ecosystem, this is something that could or may potentially be coming in, and so she just wanted to, so I'm just asking for the record, if she just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And I just want to say, as someone who comes from a transit desert, because I think I'm one of the only, maybe one of two council districts where I have no subway, I have no railroads, and so we rely very heavily on the buses and the cars and taxis. And I also say this as someone who has a lot of the drivers who live in my district, whether it's the Medallion drivers as well as the Uber Lyft drivers, and so it was just a question I had just out of curiosity. Has there been any studies, because I love data as well, or could there be a study to look into perhaps how congestion pricing is also impacting the outer boroughs as well? Because I think that one of the things we tried to advocate for was having some of those resources come to the outer boroughs, because we do also have a lot of infrastructure issues in, just sharing the roads, right? And so just wanted to get your thoughts on that, or if that's something that has been done or you'd be willing to try to look into, just on behalf of the folks in Eastern Queens as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that's common, right? You have a district with drivers and then a district where transit is difficult. And that's why I tend to think of this TLC vehicle network as public transportation. It's not necessarily public transit, and I understand why, but we're talking about the amount of trips for like a medium-sized American city. It's pretty impressive. In terms of congestion pricing, I do think that there are opportunities. The MTA, as you know, was a state legislation that was passed in 2019, and the MTA did an environmental assessment where they looked to model what the impact would be on the outer boroughs. Maybe from an accountability angle, there is a way to say, hey, what's the impact in terms of potential truck diversions, in terms of potential transit trip increases. What I will say is there is a portion of congestion pricing, I believe it's 80% gets reinvested in the New York City public transit network, of which I know you might not benefit from the subway investments, but from the bus investments as it relates to electric vehicles, bus redesigns. There are improvements happening in the public transit system, but we always want more, right? And I think that's why I'm also excited to work at the TLC, because I do know how much of a lifeline it is for people in the outer boroughs.
Oh yeah, definitely. And yeah, because I don't know if it's just anecdotally or just because I drive all the time, but even just the traffic congestion that's happening now outside of Manhattan, because I'm like, okay, it seems like these folks are now driving to a subway or a train and then from there. So I don't know what it is, but all I'm saying is it took me an hour and a half to get from Eastern Queens to Long Island City this morning, and it was torture.
Wow,
So things like that where I'm just trying to figure out better ways to improve like transportation overall, which the last point I just wanted to make is, not really a question but comment, but I just really wanted to say I appreciate your approach and your lens to which you're approaching TLC, because I think you're absolutely right. The ecosystem of transit in the city is complicated sometimes, and how do you figure all of the things out? And I think obviously your experience with MTA as well as TLC and other spaces, in addition to that, have sort of lended to your perspective and approach to TLC. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, and also for being mindful that drivers, oftentimes bear the costs. And so, as an example, for congestion pricing, you were able to carve that
Yes.
out, which I think is to be commended, because I don't think that was any small feat by any means. I'm sure that took a lot of advocacy. So we appreciate that, or I appreciate that, as a lot of drivers live in my district, and so that was a big concern that we had. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Minority Leader Carr.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see you again. Thank you for being here today and for making yourself available generally to talk about the issues facing the TLC and transit users everywhere in the 5 boroughs. I actually took almost 2 hours to get here today, so I share Councilmember Lee's pain coming from Staten Island. But I guess we should start with congestion pricing. Would you talk a little bit about, and you touched on it in your testimony and earlier, about your role in terms of your support for the congestion pricing plan and your work specifically as it relates to TLC drivers and the TLC industry?
Yeah, thank you, council member. And so the Goethals didn't work out, right? Because you're
No,
not going to Jersey.
This was Verrazano.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
When I was at the MTA as chief of staff, I did work with the legislative body in Albany to support congestion pricing. As you know, congestion pricing was a 2019 piece of legislation that was passed. And it's been a now 7-year process, a 6-year process. I support congestion pricing because I believe traffic costs New Yorkers every day. The 2 hours, the 1.5 hours, that's unacceptable. And I care about children getting to school on time. I know people who haven't been able to show up to job interviews on time and they didn't get the job. And so I really care about reducing traffic. I do think congestion pricing is a meaningful step towards that. It is working. And the funds from congestion pricing go into public transit. As an outer borough resident myself, I live in Flatbush. Is public transit perfect? No. And I've spent a lot of my time on the MTA board advocating for city riders and saying, why don't we do X? What's going on with this bus here? And so I have been at multiple sides of this issue, and I have sat in public hearings where people were really concerned. It's always tough to put a fee on. Drivers are saving, it's reported, as much as 15 minutes a day. That's an extra hour more with your family a week. As a working mom, that really matters to me. So this was a regional approach. I do remember when I was on the board of the MTA, part of the proposal was the idea if there was a $9 charge for passenger vehicles, the MTA and others were saying maybe there should just be a $9 charge on the yellow taxi for each driver coming into Manhattan and for hire vehicles. And I worked a lot with the MTA team to educate them on how disastrous I thought that was for a vehicle that is actually one of the most efficient vehicles in Manhattan. A yellow taxi trip, 8 or 9 trips a day. A passenger vehicle maybe does 1 or 2 trips a day. So, and I also recognize trying to fight for an exemption for the yellow taxis and for the for-hire vehicles, because I recognize that in 2018, the state had already passed a surcharge. So although the exemption was not granted, we were able to reduce the fee from $9 to, I think it's 50 or 75 cents in yellow, and I think it's $1.50 in for-hire vehicles. And I'm proud of that because that should be associated with each fare. That shouldn't be a cost to the driver because the passenger decides where they want to go. So that was my role. I did support congestion pricing. I'm proud of that. But I do think there's always more work to do. This is the first in the nation policy. It's a success in year 1, but we may have to tweak it to Councilmember Lee's perspective. Let's look at the impact in outer boroughs. What are potential traffic diversions that are not helpful? How do we facilitate more people getting to transit hubs now that they're not going to take their vehicle in? So those are some of the things that we can work on.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks where I come from would dispute that the program is a first-year success. I think that the snapshot commute I had today is not a standalone example of folks taking as long, if not longer, in some instances, to get to their Manhattan jobs. And that's where a lot of my constituents and other outer borough residents commute to get to work each and every day. I think that there have been, I think there's been a shuffling of the traffic patterns. I don't know that there's really been an improvement of them. And I think one of the reasons, why many of us, myself included, are suing is because, and you referred to it correctly as an environmental assessment, it wasn't the full impact statement that could have been done, didn't really do a deep enough dive, but even then, it showed that there was going to be a deleterious effect on outer borough neighborhoods and a reshuffling of existing traffic patterns that didn't necessarily have an overall benefit. And I think that's what we're seeing, and then we're paying for the privilege of more traffic and more congestion at home. And so I think that it's a difficult situation that my constituents have been put in. And we talked about this part is that they never really see any benefit on the back end through the capital plan that this program was intended to finance. So I think that we have some serious issues to contend with, both in terms of the charge as it impacts everyday lives, and then ultimately the equity of what those collections mean for outer borough communities like mine in terms of the MTA pie. But with respect to another issue related to the TLC is, we talked about this as livery services. And Staten Island had a very vibrant, independent livery scene for many years. And even before, Uber and others started competing for the customer share out of Staten Island, they were already competing for an existing labor pool that was limited. And so that was the first hit to our independent liveries, as they lost drivers. And then the second one was when finally they started operating in Staten Island. And I think that, I'm a free market guy. People should be able to choose which services they wish to hire. But I think in some degree, the TLC's past behavior put them at a disadvantage in competing against big companies like Uber and Lyft. And I'm wondering if you could share your thoughts on that as a historical perspective, and then what we could do moving forward to give them a fairer landscape to compete in.
Thank you. And it was great to learn about kind of the history with you, Councilmember Carr, on how important these are. Like I said, livery-based owners and these livery companies, I do believe they are pillars in the communities that they serve. And so like Councilmember Encarnacion mentioned, or I mentioned in my answer, this is something I'm really interested in, right? Because they are small business owners, and they are the trusted folks because they really know their community and the anchors of their community. So this is something I'm interested in diving into. I had the pleasure of meeting with the Livery-Based Owners Association in preparation for this council hearing, and I heard how they felt like they were being treated as if they were a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and they aren't, right? And so I do think some differentiation or some acknowledgement of that is something that is deserved and is needed. And I look forward, I would really actually like to meet the remaining livery services in Staten Island, because as you and I have talked about, public transit is continually a challenge in Staten Island. And I really think of these TLC vehicles as potentially, supporting, through private means, supporting public transportation. And so I welcome that and hope to coordinate with you on that.
You talked about some of the policy barriers that might be entailed with that in your earlier answers to colleagues. What do you think the TLC could potentially do on its own authority as is? What do you think generally might involve council, local lawmaking, and then to what extent is there going to be some partnership with Albany required in this?
To be honest, I do have to dig into this more. And like I said, one of the things I really want to do is listen. I've only had one meeting or two meetings with LBOA. I want to kind of dig in on where are the issues, what's the potential, regulatory constraints that we might have, that we might need to work with council on. So I look forward to that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Krishnan.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you so much for joining us today in your testimony, and I appreciate hearing your perspective. I just have a few questions, some of them which kind of may be a little bit repetitive of what you've already heard, but I wanted to just share my thoughts too. So, one is, as you know, representing Jackson Heights, where I have the largest taxi driver resident community in all of New York City. They're my constituents, my neighbors. Their kids go to school with my kids. It's important for me to really have someone who's going to be a staunch voice and champion for drivers in TLC. Too often, as I'm sure you've heard too, drivers have felt like TLC has not been really someone that has heard their concerns too, whether it's with punitive actions taken by the agency or not really understanding the issues that they face. And I think right now, with this administration, there's really a chance to change that. And so you've addressed this in different ways, but I would love to hear a bit about, how you have seen TLC respond or not respond to drivers, and then what your vision would be to make sure it's an agency that's truly hearing the concerns that drivers are facing in the city.
My mission at the at the TLC over the next, in this administration is really about championing drivers, because time and time again, and I apologize if this is repetitive, but time and time again in my career, I have seen that when you support those that actually power the transportation system, the whole system gets better. And I do know that there's been, over the years, decades, right, since 1971, tensions between drivers and TLC. They've gone up and down, right? I think part of being a champion for drivers is listening and following through on that listening. So one of the things that I have started to talk to TLC about was, can we do a driver survey? That right now, the only way we know what drivers are going through in terms of relationship with their company, a relationship, difficulty with a passenger, is through a complaint system, but not from a trends analysis, proactive analysis. And so my hope is that a driver survey, we can get a sense of like, what are the trends and things that we might not hear about, that we need to hear about, because then, is this a TLC issue? Is it an ad code issue? Is it a collaboration operational issue? Things that we can be proactive on. So I am really excited about that. But it does take a little bit of a rebuilding or a reset, and that's okay. And I also think that doesn't necessarily mean that TLC staff are wrong. Like, they are public servants. They are doing the best they can. It's leadership that has to show what we're going to value, what we're going to care about, and what is our approach in terms of listening. So that'll be really important to me. But if after my term, if someone were to say, oh, you know what, this commissioner championed drivers, that would be the greatest honor of my life.
And I appreciate that perspective, and I do think you're right. It would be a sea change in the approach of TLC to drivers. It's been too adversarial for too long, and unnecessarily so, given how important drivers are in the city. Another question I had was, we recently passed, as you might know, my legislation with the New York Taxi Workers Alliance to stop the unfair deactivations of Uber and Lyft drivers, which are a huge part of the driver workforce. This is something that I know DCWP firmly supports. Would you be committed to working with DCWP to make sure this program is implemented as soon as possible, so we can get it off the ground and stop these deactivations unfairly?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And finally, my last question was, in the pre-hearing questions you submitted, when you were asked about whether TLC should regulate the ability of platforms like Uber and Lyft to ban drivers, and if so, what types of restrictions should be imposed, you answered TLC should hold companies with questionable business practices accountable by examining if and how passenger bans are being used. I agree that there are the questionable business practices of Uber and Lyft. It's something that we've illustrated very clearly in the council with the passage of legislation to stop unfair deactivations. So can you expand upon that answer a bit? How would you hold those kinds of companies accountable with very questionable business practices that take part in things like this?
That's really important, in my discussions in preparation for this confirmation hearing. I heard a driver tell me he wants to be seen as human and not disposable. That really stayed with me. I believe that TLC, I need to do a review of the investigative and enforcement capacity at TLC. There are certain priorities that TLC has traditionally pushed forward. But like I said in my testimony, corporate accountability and transparency will be key. And that will require proactive engagement, proactive trying to get a sense of what's actually happening in our market and in our small ecosystem. And I look forward to doing kind of that capacity analysis. Do we have people that can today go out, start doing that investigation, even without a complaint coming to us? And how do we set up that infrastructure to do that? So I think my tenure at the TLC, I really wanted to be a proactive approach.
And I appreciate you saying that and highlighting the importance. I think I would say, for me as well, having someone, leading TLC who, they're two sides of the same coin. One understands how to be a voice for drivers and change this punitive and setup that's created unnecessarily so between the agency and drivers. But the other side of that coin, and more so, is corporate accountability, because these billion-dollar corporations are so quick to make their bottom lines on the backs of the drivers that are generating the revenue in the first place. But too often, TLC, I have found, has been far too willing to hear and accommodate the views of these big corporations at the expense of drivers. And so having someone who understands both of those perspectives of hearing drivers better, but also holding accountable these corporations and their questionable business practices, I think is something critical for this position. So I do appreciate your perspective and input.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I'm just going to have a few more questions before I know there's going to be round two. So Uber requires drivers to rate passengers. Feedback about passengers can result in accounts being terminated. Are you aware of this potential for this process to result in discrimination against accounts that request rides to the parts of the city where drivers do not want to go?
So I understand that so I want to be really clear. Every TLC driver, regardless of industry, yellow, for hire vehicle, they have to transport passengers to any destination within the city of New York, Westchester, Nassau, Newark Airport. They cannot tell you no. But when it comes to cancellations and things, I've definitely heard anecdotes and have heard from passengers who say something fishy seems to be going on, and that maybe there's a passenger ban happening. So I have heard that. Anything the TLC should do should be based on data. So of course, like my heart is, my heartstrings are pulled when I hear these stories, but at the same time, I know TLC staff will tell me, well, we have to collect data and we have to base it on real world experiences. And then we have to investigate what's happening to really understand how to best do this. But on both sides, right? You have lockouts on the driver's side. You might have, account cancellation on the passenger side. For either of these sides, they're either not making a fare or not being able to go where they need to go. And so that's something that TLC would be happy to dive into.
Well, currently, what is the process for that? If there was a complaint that comes in, what is the current process?
So my understanding, and again, like I have to start at the TLC and get reacquainted. But my understanding is that when a complaint is filed, 311 and others, there is some kind of investigation that happens in which the passenger may be reached out to. If a passenger takes screenshots or, in terms of evidence, like that can be really helpful. And then usually there's some kind of oath process, the Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings. Yes. But much more than that, I need to dig into more. But one of the things I am interested in, to my point to the council member Krishnan about investigations, is if we want to be more proactive, that means we can't just rely on a complaint process. Right. And so how do we find out this trend? If this is something that a company is doing.
Thank you, especially with someone who lives in the outer boroughs. Sometimes it's hard to get a service. So TLC recently replaced its accessible dispatch contractor with 3 vendors, Miles, Arrow, and Curb, which, like other apps, require users to pay with credit cards and debit cards. What will you say to advocates who complain that many people have or want to use cash?
So this issue was just recently raised to me. I was not necessarily aware of it. I'm proud to have renewed the accessible dispatch program contract, which was, I believe, $6 million a year, to at the TLC when I was there. I know that contract has ended, and now we have these new vendors, and so I'm excited to dig in on the service. And the cash point is a good one, and I want to learn more.
That'd be great because I represent a community who also seniors, and seniors do not at all times love to use credit card or debit card. They feel better using cash. So it'd be great to look into that.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll do.
When demand pricing is in effect, a trip that might cost $50 at one time might cost $100 another time. In your pre-hearing questions, you were asked whether the city's public transportation system includes the for-hire vehicle industry that TLC regulates. And if it does, whether a public transportation system should engage in demand pricing. You responded that you look forward to working on this issue. Do you want to expand on that?
I think only to say that I think price transparency really matters. And I've been thinking about price transparency in moments of emergency. For some, a friend recently told me that, she had a complication with her pregnancy and she did not use an ambulance. She took a company, an app ride. And so when you're subject to a significant price for something where you don't think that's a discretionary trip, that's really hard. And so I'm interested in digging into it. I know that TLC has data, every single fare data and the split, and maybe that's something that we want to understand more with take rate, with affordability, all of that.
Could you discuss the effect of the company like Uber and Lyft have had on the yellow cab industry?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
Could you discuss the effect of companies like Uber and Lyft have had on the yellow cab industry?
Sure. So the history is long, but when Uber and Lyft and these other app companies came into town, there was a decrease in the number of trips for yellow cabs, specifically in Manhattan. Definitely an impact on medallion prices, which was partially how we're in this situation now. At the same time, for many, like we discussed in the outer boroughs, where if, we discussed in the outer boroughs, some of these companies did present more option and more choice. And so while, transportation choices increase, it did have this really big impact on the market. And I think, the city of New York has been working towards stability in the yellow market.
Okay, so given the effect that the Uber and Lyft have had on the yellow cab industry, do you consider all of them, like Uber and Lyft, to be public transportation?
I consider any trip that is regulated and licensed in New York City part of our public transportation system. When we traditionally think about public transportation, we think about obviously like public transit with big subsidies. This is a different market. This is a market that is private transportation, but is facilitated, and it does have a public role to play. I've seen passengers who deeply have benefited from some of these companies. At the same time, as with the vehicle cap, we know that there was a point in time when so many vehicles flooded the streets of Manhattan that it actually exacerbated congestion, and that's not a good place to be either. That doesn't really serve the public good. So I think of it in that way. We regulate these trips so they do have a public transportation element. And one area where that lens might be really useful is a complaint I've heard time and time again from drivers and actually the disability community is that we give a lot of different messages on the use of our streets. And so a passenger can say, please drop me off, in this middle of this block. And if it happens to be in a bus lane, that's a conflict, right? And there are penalties associated if you're in the bus lane for a long time. And yet, customers want to be dropped off where they want to be dropped off, specifically a person with a disability. It might be really important that they get dropped off at that specific address. And a driver, that's a very difficult position to put a driver in, to say, hey, I can't go there because it's a bus lane. But then TLC says, well, we want to be customer focused. So that's where I feel like the public transportation system needs to work together. And it's my job, hopefully as chair and CEO, to facilitate those conversations so we can have like a rational transportation system.
Thank you. I do have one more line of questioning, but before I do that, I'm going to give it over to Council Member Encarnacion.
Hello again.
Hi.
I do not have additional questions for you, but the majority leader did.
Yes.
He was called away to a meeting, and so I wanted to ask his question on his behalf. So please do not credit me for this question. The majority leader would like to ask you about a company called Empower that has been illegally operating in the city for years. Empower is offering cheap rides to entice customers. They are only able to do that because they're operating completely outside of the legal structure. They aren't paying mandatory charges, congestion pricing, or into the workers' compensation funds. As I understand it, or as the majority leader understands it, TLC is simply warning drivers to stay away, but hasn't taken any real enforcement action to protect consumers, unlike other jurisdictions. So what kind of message is the city sending by letting this kind of go unchecked? And what's the range of options you see that are appropriate here to take?
Thank you for this question. I have to thank Councilmember Abreu for this question because we have discussed this in the past. I'm aghast that this is happening. It's not okay. And Empower lures drivers with these claims, but yet if or when a driver is in a crash, a passenger gets injured, leaves them high and dry. So as you've mentioned, Empower is not a registered base in TLC. They were thrown out of the Washington, D.C. area. Their decision to operate unlicensed, and I believe TLC has approached them to become licensed and they refuse, is a huge risk to drivers and passengers. You all spend a lot of time and effort developing laws. Well, this company is just running afoul of all of them. So I will use every power in the TLC's authority and as much as I can in the City of New York's authority to stop Empower and to stop this illegal operation.
So similar to what DC has done, hopefully?
Yes, and I'm excited to work with my colleagues across the city to make this happen.
And would you seek to recover all the taxes and fees that they've never paid over all these years?
I can't really comment on like investigative strategy right now, but what I will say is this is something that's top of mind to me, and I am aghast that it's happened for so long. And so I just need to dig into it to understand. But I do think TLC is working on this issue.
Okay. I thank you for him, and I thank you, Chair, for allowing me to ask the question.
Of course. So my last line of questioning. You have told this committee that if appointed to serve as the chair of the TLC, you will not resign your position on the board of the MTA unless and until Mayor Mamdani names replacement. Is that still your position?
Unless, I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part?
Sure. Unless the mayor has named a replacement.
Okay, yes, that is still my position. I want to be really clear. I do serve on the MTA board. I have not been nominated by Mayor Mamdani to serve on the board for this term. And so the previous mayor nominated me, and I'm going to just stay in the position until the mayor names his nominees. But for the MTA, I am only one of 3 appointed or nominated city members. And so we are already kind of a small voice on the MTA board. So I do think it is necessary and I should do my fiduciary duty. I just want to note I'm not compensated for board service on the MTA. And I think I can, fully serve as TLC chair as other agencies heads have done in the past. For example, in the last administration, the city planning commissioner served on the MTA board.
Okay, so Section 1100 of the Charter provides that every head of a department shall give his or her whole time to the duties of the office and shall not engage in any other occupation, profession, or employment. How do you reconcile this position you just said with the law?
So want to be really clear, the hours that I spend, which is probably 5 to 10 hours a month, is on volunteer time. It is not during my TLC duties.
Section 1115 of the Charter provides that any person holding any office, whether by election or appointment, who while during their term of office accepts any other civil office connected with the government of the city, shall be deemed to have vacated the office. So by what authority do you claim you could remain in the office if you're appointed to the chair of the TLC?
So I will say I sought advice from the Conflicts of Interest Board related to this, and they mentioned I did not need any waiver. I believe it may fall under the government-to-government exception, and my understanding is that it was cleared by COIB.
How long is your term for the MTA board?
So it technically ended December 31st, and I'm a holdover for the city.
Okay. Do you have any indication, administration, whether they will find a replacement?
I have not spoken to the mayor about this.
Okay. Just to clarify, this current, what COIB covers Chapter 68. Right, and this is not the same the chapter of the charter that we are talking about. Just to clarify that on the record.
Okay. I'm happy to come back and discuss this with you to make sure.
It is just to clear. It's Chapter 49.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to come back and we can further discuss.
Thank you. So in addition to distinctions I just talked about, back to the issue of the remaining on the board and also be representing, being the CEO of a TLC. Just because these are two different positions, can you explain why that it won't come up as a conflict if you stay on both?
So in terms of conflict of time, I can do the MTA work on my volunteer time. In terms of potential conflicts, in terms of subject matter and issue, depending on the issue, I'm happy to recuse on certain matters. I will say MTA and TLC are both entities that have similar missions, a safe and efficient transportation of passengers, and there are actually a lot of points of collaboration that would support the public good. And so I do not believe it's a conflict, and I believe that actually I have a track record of championing TLC and driver issues on the board, and I believe it is actually helpful that I understand public transit issues as it relates to the TLC.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other members have any more questions, Ms. Valdavia, you are now excused.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Really
you for
appreciate
your
it.
time today.
Thank you.
I now open up the floor for the public for comments. We ask that you please limit your comments to 2 minutes. If you wish to speak, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant of Arms and you'll be given an opportunity to make your comments. Also, if you have a written statement, please provide a copy of that statement to the Sergeant of Arms. We're gonna do the public testimony of people that's in the room first, and then we'll move on to Zoom. For the first panel, I have just Justin Wuru. Am I not pronouncing this correctly? Wood. Justin Wood. Great. Carmen Cruz. And Veronica Martinez. This is a three. Okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay, you can
Okay.
begin.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Justin Wood, Director of Policy at New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on the nomination of Midori Valdivia to serve as the chair. For well over a decade, New York Lawyers has worked in close partnerships with the Access-a-Ride Reform Group and the Taxis for All Coalition and other disability justice organizations to reform accessibility in both the public transit and the for-hire vehicle and taxi sectors. We're happy to support Mayor Mamdani's nomination of Midori Valdivia as chair of the TLC. In addition to her extensive background as a public transit planner, Ms. Valdivia has specific experience in bringing urgently needed accessible taxis and for-hire vehicles to New York City streets. And as an MTA board member, she has consistently championed accessibility and listened thoughtfully to transit and paratransit riders with disabilities. We'll submit a detailed set of policy recommendations into the record. We're really excited to work with the council, with the administration, and with the TLC on ways to promote accessibility, reduce the climate impacts of this enormous vehicle fleet, and to promote justice for drivers in this huge industry. I'll just highlight a few that came up in the hearing. We are excited about the future of vehicles that are simultaneously wheelchair accessible and zero emissions, and we want to continue working with the council. We're really appreciative of a resolution from the council in favor of state legislation that through a modest $1 surcharge on Uber and Lyft trips would create a large, substantial $250 or more million a year fund statewide to promote accessibility, on-demand paratransit, driver justice, and electrification in the industry. So we'd love to continue working with you and the TLC on that. I'll also just say, you know, our studies have consistently found that while there is progress in New York City in closing the accessibility gap with Uber and Lyft, it's not enough. And we'd like to see the TLC and council disaggregate some of the data on response times for wheelchair accessible vehicles by neighborhood. We're excited to work on that. And then finally, we'd really like to see the TLC become a leader in the region and the state, because once you cross the border from New York City to surrounding counties, there simply are no accessible vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cruz?
Yeah.
Is there a translator in the room? Yeah. Oh.
Hello, thank you. My name is Veronica Martinez. Am I able to go?
Yes, you can. Yes, you could start. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. I am an Uber driver, member of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. My union supports Midori Valdivia for the next TLC chair. I have been a TLC licensed driver since 2007. The issue I want the next TLC commissioner to focus is on regulating the FHV rental market. I own my own vehicle through a lease-to-own program and rent the plate. FHV drivers like me need protections against unfair business practices that leaves us at the mercy of these rental companies just like American Lease, Tower, Buggy, and Fast Track. We need the new TLC chairperson to regulate the FHV leasing market like the TLC had regulated the yellow cab leasing in the past for many years. We, the FHV lease drivers, are subject to high rental fees, required to take the car for repairs at the company's shop, even when they don't have qualified mechanics. Our car is rigged so that they can turn off the controls from afar, and it happened to me in the middle of a ride dropping off a child. They turned off the car without reason or warning, making it unsafe for my passenger. All the foot and car traffic around me, and ultimately for myself, was dangerous and unsafe. They ring a loud, piercing sound that can cause heart and hearing problems, and it could lead to vertigo and hearing loss. These are the scenes from a horror movie, not legitimate FHV business practices in 2026. TLC has neglected us and thrown us to the wolves. They allowed us FHV drivers to be singled out and exploited. Under the chairwoman, Valdivia, we need regulating the FHV market and as immediately as possible. Please help us. Thank you.
Thank you. So Ms. Cruz and Ms. Wood, you are excused. I'm going to bring on the translator, Mr. Michael Simon, up.
Igualmente, gracias. ¿Escribiste algo? Sí, sí. Vamos a hacer, ¿ok? Vamos a hablar por unos minutos. Yo te paro. Ok. Ok. Sergeant, she speak first or him? Primero lees hasta aquí y luego yo interpreto, ¿ok? Ok, con confianza, no tengas miedo. Habla con confianza.
Okay. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Carmen, soy miembro de la Alianza de Trabajadores de Taxi de Nueva York.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Carmen. I'm a member of the Workers Alliance, Taxi Workers Alliance members of the City of New York.
Tengo 25 años trabajando como taxista y 11 años trabajando con Uber y Lyft. En octubre, en el 2003, obtuve mi primer licencia de TLC.
Okay. I have been working for 25 years as a taxi driver. In October 2003, I obtained my first TLC driver license. And I've been working as a Uber and Lyft driver for 11 years.
En estos 25 años que tengo trabajando como...
No, perdón, te saltaste esto. Sorry, she skipped one part.
Okay. Mi sindicato apoya a Midori Valdivia para la próxima presidenta de TLC.
Ok, continúa. Más abajo.
En estos 25 años que tengo trabajando como taxista, no he visto ningún progreso y ningún beneficio.
Okay. My labor union, I think this is the correct word, right, is supporting Midori Valdivia for her to be the next TLC president. In these 25 years that I've been working as a taxi driver and have been working as a Uber or Lyft driver, I have not seen any progress and I have not seen any benefits.
Porque todo sube, los gastos del carro, el gas, y ni trabajando 14 o 17 horas nos alcanza para cubrir el mantenimiento del carro, empezando con la licencia de TLC.
Okay, un segundo. We don't have any benefits because everything is going up. We have so many expenses and we have been working even 14 to 17 hours per day. And the money that we're earning is not enough to cover these expenses. We have high expenses like gas, right? Car expenses. And this money that we're earning is not enough money to maintain our cars, starting for obtaining the TCL license.
el seguro, la gasolina, el car wash, todo subió y el pago del conductor cada día es menos.
Okay, just one second. I just want to clarify something. Cuando hablas de car washes, cuando tú pagas para
Sí,
lavar,
todo, sí.
lavar tu carro en esos centros
Sí.
donde se lavan los automóviles. Okay, okay. Everything is so expensive and everything is going up. Starting by the car insurance is very expensive. We also had to spend a lot of money in car washes, like washing our car all the time. We had to pay money to the mechanic. Also, we had to pay money for car reparations, and everything went up and it's very expensive.
Y el pago del conductor cada día es menos. Necesitamos un aumento inmediato debido al aumento de seguros y de gas.
Seguro de automóviles.
Sí, seguro de automóvil.
And the salary of a car driver is every day less. And this is very bad. We need an increase in the driver's salary right away as soon as they can, because it's not only our salary, but also the increase in the car insurance. The car insurance is becoming very expensive, and the gasoline as well.
Por ejemplo, TLC podría aumentar la tarifa por milla para los viajes de Uber y Lyft. Y por esta razón estamos apoyando a Midori Valdivia para poner estos cambios.
For example, what TLC can do, they can increase the tariff or the mileage fee, right? For the trips of Uber and Lyft, when we are driver Uber and Lyft, they can increase that payment of the mileage fees. And this is the reason why we are supporting to Midori Valdivia so they can do the changes.
Para poner estos cambios y mejorar la condición de los conductores de la ciudad de Nueva York.
Okay, to do the changes and to improve the condition of all the car drivers who are working in the city of New York.
Muchas gracias por su atención.
Okay. Thank you very much to all of you for your attention to this serious matter.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm going to ask for you to put, as an interpreter, to put your name on the record.
Yes, I will do it, Councilwoman. It's no problem. Okay, that's all, Councilwoman.
Great. Oh,
Where I can write my name? Where?
just say it. Just say it for the
Yes.
record.
My name is Carl Edwin Archbold. This is my name, Carl Edwin Archbold.
Thank
You
you.
can call me just Edwin. Edwin
Edwin,
Archbold.
thank you. So I have one more person online that's going to need a translation. I believe it's Ms. Tavernes. Is she on?
Un segundo. Creo que puedes irte, no hay problema. Ya, encuéntrate conmigo en unos minutos. Quiero... Okay, no problem. I write it here. I have my name here.
In the meantime, I'm going to call up Mr. Simon. You could just stay there. I'm going to call up Mr. Richard Chow.
No problem.
Yeah. Well, just- Okay, you know what? While we are working on finding Ms. Tavernes, I'm going to ask Mr. Simon to go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting to speak. I'm very disappointed. I've been a medallion owner since 1976. I was around when the Hack Bureau was in the police precincts. I was an owner driver for about 15 years. Then I bought a few more medallions, and I'm an active manager till this day. I don't know how to say it, but it's all wrong. The point of view is all wrong. The problem is the medallion owner, the medallion driver, who doesn't want to be an Uber driver, who doesn't want to be a Lyft driver, who wants to be a medallion taxi driver. And he wants to make enough money being a medallion taxi driver to support himself and a family. That way cannot exist when high volume for hire services exists alongside that medallion industry. The medallion industry was created after the Depression for one purpose: to decrease the amount of vehicles that were being taxis, because everybody who had a car made their car a taxi because nobody was employed. So the left-leaning mayor of that time, Fiorello LaGuardia, decided to put out the medallion. So if you wanted to be a taxi driver, you now had to buy a medallion, and the number of taxis went down dramatically from about 30 or 40,000 vehicles to about 11,000 vehicles. What was the purpose of that? The purpose of that was to increase drivers' income, medallion driver income, be it an owner or a driver. It was to eliminate the competition so that those drivers could earn a living. The high volume for hire services deregulated the industry. It caused the holy grail of the TLC used to be driver income, increased driver income.
Mr. Simon, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up.
Okay, now the holy grail has changed into shareholder profits because of the corporate, giants convincing everybody that their services are needed. The medallion industry was created for driver income. To enforce the exclusive of the medallion is to increase driver income, be it a driver or a medallion owner.
Thank you. Mr. Chow?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Chow. I'm a member of the New York Taxi Walk Alliance, and I drive the yellow cab. My union support Midori Valdivia for the next TLC chair. I have been TLC licensed since 2006. The issue I want the next TLC chair commissioner focus on the gasoline price so expensive, more than $4.99 per gallon. 12 days ago, the war was started. TSC could increase the per mileage rate all FAG trip, push for the state to allow yellow and green cab driver to keep the 50-cent tax or consider a temporary surcharge on every TSC trip. My loan with Marbrigade, I paid $1,234 per month, more than 200 loans left behind 4 years ago, the MRP program. Some of my friends, OSK, paid $2,000 a month. They overpaid $766 a month. Plus the FHG new car payment, $800 a month. The insurance, very expensive, went up more than 25%, and we cannot survive. So since January 2, much snow falling in New York City, the wars in Iran, riderships are down, sometimes 1.5 hours. We don't have a fare. Yellow cab lost a lot of street hail. I hope the TLC and the city should create the more street hail fare for the taxi. For example, put back the sticker price on the door and advertising JFK, LaGuardia, Grand Central, Port Authority, the Penn Station, or inside the cab. The drivers are working class people, pay check to check, and walking dangerous on the street. Please, we need from the TLC and City Council support our family so we can survive. Thank you so much.
Thank you both for your testimony. You can take a seat back there. I'm going to ask Mr. Archibald to still stay. I think we have now found Ms. Tavernes online, who's going to need the translation.
No problem. Is she connected now, Miss Sarah?
Ms. Tavernes, do you want to unmute yourself?
Puedes, por favor,
You may begin.
poner el micrófono, por favor. Okay.
¿Me escucha?
Sí, sí te escucho. ¿Me escuchas bien?
Okay. Sí, ya lo escucho.
Okay.
Disculpa.
vamos a hablar en pausas. Tú hablas unas 2 oraciones, yo te paro un momento y le vamos a la interpretación. Can you put it?
Está bien.
It's fine. Okay.
Mi nombre es Lewis Taveras y soy miembro del New York Taxi Workers Alliance.
Ok, continúa.
Soy conductor de TLC y manejo para Uber y Lyft desde el año 2021.
Okay, un segundo. And one of the drivers, I hold a TCL license, and I've been driving for a long time. Continúa.
Mi sindicato apoya a Midori Valdivia como próxima presidenta de la TLC.
My labor union is supporting Ms. Valdivia for the, for the next election, for her to become the chair of the TLC. Continúa.
Quiero que la próxima presidenta de la TLC se enfoque de inmediato en aumentar el pago por milla debido al alza constante de los costos que enfrentamos los conductores.
Un segundo. I want her to focus in the increase of the salary and also the increase of the mileage payment also for the drivers, because we have very constant and very often, charges and increases of all those fees because of what is happening recently. Continúa, por favor.
El seguro es uno de los ejemplos más claros. En mi caso, el seguro liability para mi Toyota Sienna para el año 2023 fue de $3,984.66.
Segundo. For example, the insurance is one of the main issues. For example, the car insurance is extremely expensive. For example, I have a Toyota Sienna, and the insurance. Oh, one second. ¿Cuánto es el dinero del seguro? ¿Cuánto es?
Para el 2000, voy a decir los 3 años, por los últimos 3 años, para que vean la diferencia.
Continúa.
Para el 2023 fue de $3,984.66.
In the last 3 years, the insurance premium is around $3,983.23. It's extremely expensive for me to pay the amount of car insurance. Continúa.
No. Para el año 2024 fue de $4,273.33.
4,273, ¿cierto?
Sí.
Okay. And now for the year 2024, the car insurance is around $4,273.23. It's also very expensive. Continúa, por favor.
Y para el año 2025 alcanzó los $5,459.23.
¿5,459?
Sí.
Okay. And now in the year 2025 is $5,459. This is very expensive, even worse than the previous years. Continúa.
Y eso sin contar el seguro el full coverage, que también sigue siendo una carga importante porque necesitamos tener 2 seguros en vez de 1.
And I was talking only about liability insurance, because if we do the full coverage, it's even worse. The insurance fees are even more expensive, because as a drivers, we are supposed to be covered by both insurance, the liability insurance and also the full coverage too. Continúa, señor Taveras. Continúa, por favor.
Y eso sin contar las reparaciones, la gasolina y los gastos operativos que nos golpean diariamente cada vez que intentamos sobrevivir y mantener a nuestras familias.
Un segundo.
Y la verdad es muy difícil.
Dame un segundo, okay? And this doesn't include other expenses, for example, like reparations, mechanic services, also expenses that we have, like car wash, for example, expenses that we had in order to maintain our car. And this is hitting very badly my family because it's extremely expensive for me to survive like this. Continúa, señor Taveras. Continúa.
Eso era todo lo que tiene que decir. Muchísimas gracias por escuchar el problema que tenemos.
This is what I wanted to say to you. I want you to listen the problems that we are facing right now, and thank you so much for your attention to this serious matter. Eso es todo, ¿sabes dónde? Todo, ¿cierto?
Sí.
Okay. This is everything. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Mr. Archibald, for your services today. I think you are done.
You're welcome, Ms. Susan. No problem.
I'd like to call up the next group, Mr. Chin, Mr. Tsai, and Mr. Joe Rappaport.
Hi, good evening all. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Mr. Wayne Chen. I'm a member of New York Taxi Worker Alliance. And today I here to fully support the nomination of Ms. Mondari for the next TSC chair. And I also like to TSC to work on our problems facing the medallion owner, especially the wage driver like me. I operate a wage taxi cab for accessible uh, disability community. I got my wave car from last October to the pilot program. At the last pilot program, we will provide the affordable loan. However, we still need adequate support for the program. Like myself, we had a operating cost a lot higher than like 7 years ago. 7 years ago, our cost, wheelchair cost like $50,000, now like $80,000 for the car, and also operating expense are a lot higher than before, like gasoline, maintaining the car. So we need, my late father is a disabled person, and who need a wheelchair to get around the city. So I fully aware of the challenge the disability community face to get around the city. So at the same time, we provide the service for the special need of the disability community. We also need the support from the state and city to offset the cost of the buying the car, like eliminating the state tax on the new vehicle purchase, and also also I like the city to reinstate the tip funding for $1 trip for or each wayfare for the driver, because we have we face a rising cost of the operating of the way vehicle, especially right now. Not only the operating costs, we had to face the cost of living challenge, right? Higher living challenge. Also, we asked the DSU to waive the requirement for the older driver from the waive requirement, because I'm doing a lot of wayfare already, because they need significant strength to unload, load, and also provide the rent. So we asked the TSC to waive the requirement for older driver and disabled driver. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Ung and members of the industry that are present. My name is Bedavi Desai. I'm the Executive Director of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. We are proud to support the nomination of Midori Valdivia as the next chair of the Taxi Limousine Commission. It is such an honor to be on this panel in particular, next to a very longtime friend from Taxis for All campaign, and next to my brother, Wayne. It's honestly really heartbreaking to hear the testimonies of Wayne, and I'm really struck by what Carmen said earlier. These are longtime veteran drivers who feel they've just never seen change. And that's because for decades now, every time we take a step forward, there is an attack against us, whether it's from the millionaire corporations to the billionaire corporations to now the trillionaires of Waymo that are hunting us down, or it's from the different interests from the city agencies to the state and the MTA. At each step, drivers are treated as if their rights are disposable. We have to make a generational change. We cannot nickel and dime this workforce into poverty, and we cannot nickel and dime them out of poverty. Today, for example, on insurance, drivers are going from paying $400 a month to some of them as much as $1,000 a month, all because American Transit is potentially facing bankruptcy because the regulators shut their eyes to these corporations. Why are drivers the one to pay these costs? We have to end the cycle of generational poverty. We have to end the cycle of not treating the right of drivers to feed their children and to have a decent life, to not have to work 6 to 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day. It is a public good in the interest of the public good to end these working conditions and truly make a generational change. Don't let this hearing be about the CEO of Empower. Make this hearing be about the dignity of the almost 200,000 men and women and their families who depend on this job for a decent and a dignified life. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have my written copies of my testimony here. Thanks so much for the opportunity to testify and to be here with my colleagues here and other people from the disability community and the industry in general. I appreciate the questions you asked about accessibility. I think they're important for the chair to address, assuming she is approved by the City Council. You know, my organization is the Brooklyn Center for Independence of the Disabled. We're a core member of a group called the Taxis for All campaign, which has been around for 30 years, advocating for more accessibility in the taxi world and for higher services based on universal design principles. So we appreciate your questions. We appreciated the willingness of the nominee to answer them. We met with her recently, and that was really valuable, and we support her nomination. There's so many issues that we talk about accessibility. I want to focus on one thing that you asked about, which is the loss of the accessible dispatch program. When we settled with the city a lawsuit about accessibility, we advocated for a dispatch system so that wheelchair users would be able to get a taxi no matter what, wherever they were. And that program worked, and it worked well. But the TLC, claiming that it cost too much, ended that program last month. And we are very hopeful that the new chair will reestablish that program. The way it works is that if you need an accessible cab, any place in New York City, you can call this phone number or use an app. Many people can't use an app, so they can call. If you have a speech difference, if you have a dexterity difference, you can get through. So we urge the chair to restore this program, and we urge the council to look at ways of helping this program go back into business. Thank you very much.
Thank you all of your testimony. I'd like to call up Ms. Ryan and Mr. Averzano.
Hello. Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Adriano Averzano. I'm a member of the Taxi Workers Alliance, and I drive a yellow taxi cab. I'm also an owner-operator. I've been a taxi driver for 22 years, and I've been an owner-operator for the past 16 years. Me and my union, the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, support the nomination of Midori Valdivia for the chair of the Taxi and Limousine Commission. I want to mention I'm one of the 200 and so drivers that have been left behind for the Medallion Relief Program. I'm hoping that the new chair, if appointed, will reopen the program and provide the assistance to the drivers like me who are drowning in debt and have high mortgage payments. It's been a very cumbersome situation for me and my family, and the financial strain is growing and growing and growing. And I don't know how long I could hold on anymore with the mounting bills and the mounting insurance payments and everything. I know that the mayor is very friendly to the taxi driver, and I'm hoping that Ms. Midori Valdivia will also be too. I'm also hoping that she'll address the situation with the rising cost of the wheelchair accessible cars. And if the city has met the requirements, look into the possibility of not mandating all the vehicles to be wheelchair accessible because they are roughly double the price. The higher price of the vehicle puts more financial burden and strain on the driver because they have higher payments. It's a higher nut at the end of the month. I hope that everyone here understands that financial strain makes it more difficult for the working man. Uh, Again, we support her nomination and we look forward to her bringing out change to the industry and making it better for the driver and the passenger. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jean Ryan, President of Disabled in Action, and we are a member of Taxis for All campaign, a coalition we began in 1996, 30 years ago. DIA is in favor of appointing and confirming Midori Valdivia as the chair of the TLC. She worked on the TLC before and knows the issues of people with disabilities from that work and as a board member of the MTA, a position we want her to be able to continue in. Our issues with the MTA and the TLC intersect in many ways, including the on-demand program and the broker services. No, we wouldn't have accessible taxis, Uber, Lyfts, and for-hire vehicle car services without Taxis for All continually advocating for accessible vehicles and our ability to get rides. It was life-changing, I can tell you, because I couldn't go anywhere unless I called 2 days in advance. It was really horrible before I could get taxis and Ubers and Lyfts. No city in the United States, as far as I know, has wheelchair access to this form of public transportation like New York City does. And yet, we cannot hail an accessible cab. We could stick our arms out, we could talk to the drivers, they refuse to take us. And we have to wait longer or unable to get an Uber or Lyft vehicle in a timely manner, if at all. We're hoping to work with the TLC and stakeholders to get better access to have 100% accessible taxis and for-hire vehicles, and to revive the well-functioning accessible dispatch program so people can, with disabilities, can get a cab from anywhere in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to move on to the testimony on Zoom. First is Allison Langley, and then Augustine Tang, and then Ira Goldstein.
Good
We begin.
afternoon. Oh, thank you. My name is Allie Langley. I'm a staff attorney at the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. The Taxi Workers Alliance supports the nomination of Midori Valdivia as the next chairperson of the Taxi and Limousine Commission. And we hope that in addition to the issues highlighted by other staff and members, the new chair will focus on finishing the Medallion Relief Program. The Medallion Relief Program, or MRP, has been a huge success. It's lifted thousands of drivers out of the despair of the debt crisis. To date, it's provided nearly $475 million of debt relief to over 2,000 drivers. Despite this, as you just heard from Adriano, hundreds of drivers remain in a situation where the debt crisis never ended from them. And you heard directly from Adriano about how much despair this causes. This is because their lenders did not want to restructure their loans directly, which is the first step of participating in the Medallion Relief Program. The Taxi Workers Alliance, as soon as we realized this was the case, have been working on figuring out a solution, and we actually found one. We worked with a company Capital, a small community development financial institution, alongside the TLC, to create a pilot program for a slightly different version of the MRP, where a new lender steps in, pays off the old lender, and restructures the loan under the terms of the MRP. And this solution works. It works really well for the small group of drivers who were able to access it. Unfortunately, a company capital is small. They don't have the funding to finance the remaining loans. And instead of working with the Taxi Workers Alliance to set up and find the financing needed to get that final group of drivers across the finish line, instead, the Taxi and Limousine Commission ended MRP prematurely. They ended it when this group of about 300 drivers, 200 to 300 drivers, have not seen any relief at all from the debt crisis. They're in the same position they were in, 5, 10 years ago, that other drivers have gotten relief from. And it's essential that we help these drivers access the same relief that every other driver who's had access to the MRP has been able to
Your
access
time's
over
expired.
4 years. We ask that the TLC stand with the Taxi Workers Alliance in partnership to find this financing and finish the MRP and make sure that all drivers have access to this historic and life-saving debt relief. Thank you.
Ms. Tang?
You may begin.
Hey, good afternoon, Chair and the members of the committee. My name is Augustine Tang, and I'm a member of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, medallion owner for 10 years and driven yellow for 5 of those years. My union and I are here to support the nomination of Midori Valdivia as the next chair of the Taxi and Limousine Commission. We recently had an opportunity to sit down and speak with Midori. What stood out to us was that she was grounded, open, and certainly willing to listen. She wanted to hear directly what drivers are dealing with and on the street every day. For a long time, many drivers have felt that TLC acted more like the judge, jury, and executioner rather than a partner in the industry. Drivers have often felt penalized more than heard. What gives many of us hope is that Midori understands the relationship that needs to change and that rebuilding trust between the agency and drivers has to be a priority. But support also comes with expectation. There are several issues that the next TLC chair must focus on. First, the medallion relief program must be reopened and completed. While the program helped many owner drivers, myself included, as I was able to dive into another career, there are still owners who are left outside of it and still trapped in loans that will be impossible to repay. The TLC should work and with the lender and the city to restructure remaining loans and allow the transfer of guarantees so the drivers are not left behind. Second, we need to support the drivers who must meet the federal requirement for wheelchair accessible cars. Drivers want to serve the riders with disability, but operating the WAVE vehicles come with significantly higher costs. The city should provide real support, including tax relief, and reinstate programs like
Time's
the TIF
expired.
grants. Oh, so drivers are not financially punished for the providing essential services. Third, driver income must be addressed. Costs like insurance, gas, and vehicles maintenance continue to rise. TLC should work to ensure that drivers are earning a true prevailing wage that reflects the long hours, risks, and like rising costs of this job. I respectfully urge the council to confirm Midori Valdivia as the next chair of the Taxi Limousine Commission and to work with drivers to address the urgent issues. Thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Goldstein, and after Mr. Goldstein, it will be Mr. Sancho Prasad, and then Mr. Laman Jada.
You may begin.
Okay, good afternoon, Chairwoman Ong and other council members and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Ira Goldstein. I'm the Executive Director of the Black Car Fund. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, the Black Car Fund was created by New York State for the purpose of providing workers' compensation coverage for independent black car drivers, which now includes Uber and Lyft drivers statewide. The fund also provides a host of other benefits that I'm happy to discuss offline. Today, I testify in support of Midori Valdivia's nomination by Mayor Rondami to serve as chair and commissioner of the New York City Taxi Limousine Commission. Ms. Valdivia brings exactly the type of deep, practical, and balanced transportation experience this role requires. You already heard about Ms. Valdivia's experience and background, so I will speak to my direct interactions with her. I have known Midori since her days as a deputy commissioner at the TLC. And what stood out to me is that she listened. She understood, as I learned during my almost 10 years as chief of staff at the TLC, that good policy is strengthened when agency leadership is open to input from the stakeholders who live with the consequences of those decisions every day. These qualities matter enormously at the TLC, where the issues are rarely simple and require balancing competing interests. More recently, as member of the MTA board, Midori has shown herself to be open to thoughtful ideas on difficult issues, such as congestion pricing, where she agreed that the FHV and the taxi industries should be subject to a one-time fee on passengers rather than the one-time fee incurred possibly by the driver, which she went into in depth, and there was no small fee. She engaged in those issues in a serious and balanced way. As TLC chair, I believe she will strike the right balance and between advocating for and enforcing driver rights while also
Your
protecting
time's
the
expired.
TLC. Okay, wrapping up, I think New York City needs a TLC chair who understands transportation as an economic engine and public responsibility. If her nomination is approved, I look forward to working with her for the betterment of TLC licensed drivers and businesses and for making this city a better and safer place. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Siancho Prasad.
You may begin.
Oh,
Yes,
hi.
you can
Oh,
start. Yeah, you can begin. Yes, we can hear you. You could begin.
yes, my name is Kuber Sancho Prasad. I've been a taxi driver for the last 12 years. I've been driving in New York City. My dad was a taxi driver since 1984. I passed away in 2017. He was a medallion owner. I've been a driver and now became a medallion owner. I want to continue on. I work together with Taxi Workers Alliance. I want to, in support of Commissioner, in support of the nominee of Commissioner Mandori, Mandori Vanda. I can't pronounce the last name. Sorry. Um, but I would like to continue from where Augie left off. We want she was willing to listen to the drivers, understand that we are getting flanked from different fronts. We got flanked from the TLC, where we saw the TLC more of an enforcer than a partner in the industry. We also see we have problems with. We also get penalized by the NYPD, DOT, MTA if we get into the bus lanes. We have so many fees. I recently tried to get insurance for my taxi, and I ended up have to be one of the drivers who would have to pay $1,000 a month until I get cleared, until my rate goes down in probably 3 years. Where some people have been driving for many years, like me, and they got charged this high price. I believe that Midori would come into this industry and give drivers and the industry some sort of dignity back, and I support her in this nominee. Thank you.
Mr. Jada?
Yes, hi. Thank you, Chair. My name is Lamin Jata. I'm a member of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, and I've been a driver for TLC for the past 13 years. I drive for Uber. My union supports Ms. Maidori Valdivia for next TLC chairperson. I think she is going to make a great chairperson because for the first time working in the industry, I've seen a nominated member approach drivers to interact with us and seeking to know our concerns and recommendations for her. And we asked the TLC to look into the high cost of operating as a taxi driver here in the city, the insurance costs, and recently the gas prices are hand in hand going off the roof, and TLC fees and fines are heavy on us. It's unaffordable. We ask that the next year to look into these things to make it affordable for drivers so that we don't have rates in one hand and in other hand some you have other hands in our pockets, picking our pockets, from all, industries like insurance, NYPD, the DOT, or so we need protection from all those people trying to, make life difficult for us as taxi driver in the city. Please, we need your assistance in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Mr. Alaya, then Mr. Marway, Mr. Salome, and then lastly, Mr. Christopher Leon Johnson.
You may begin.
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry about that. Uh,
Hey,
my
thank
name
you.
is Muhammad. My name is Muhammad Aliyu. I'm a member of New York Taxi Worker Alliance, and I've been driving taxi since 2001. I became a owner driver in 2004, and then my union support Mrs. Valdivia. So do I. I think the whole system failed us, and then it's very sad because it's all about our income. Our income are being attacked from every corner, and then this is under the eyes of the government himself. The dream are being turned to nightmare. I mean, when we look back then, when you drive a yellow cab, your children can become lawyers. They can become doctors. One of the yellow cab driver even have his daughter becoming Speaker of the White House. No more. No more, because the system failed us. I mean, everything we live for have been taken away. You work hard, instead of getting out of poverty, you getting dig into poverty. But listen to Mrs. Valdivia's testimony today. I think she's bringing hope. And then I think hopefully things will change. But our income issues must be addressed. We need immediate raise. Yellow cab need immediate raise. Not only through the mirror, but with all this EL company too.
Your time's expired.
Everything getting expensive when our income getting only reduced. I mean, hardworking poor trying to get out of poverty, but the system only find to dig him into the poverty. Hopefully, I think the next year will be able to address our income issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Marway?
And
Thank you. I'll be speaking for Mr. Marwa. He's my chief of staff. Chair Ung and members of the council. My name is Joshua Sear, and I want to begin by congratulating nominee Valdivia. While I'm admittedly disappointed that she commented on Empower without having ever spoken to anyone from the company, based on everything else that I heard from her today, I'm hopeful that she will be a strong champion for drivers. As CEO of Empower, a software company that is helping well over 10,000 TLC licensed drivers to work for themselves and earn a sustainable living, I'm excited about the opportunity to work with Commissioner nominee Valdivia to increase competition, increase driver earnings, and increase affordability for New Yorkers. As many of the council members' questions today have highlighted, the existing Uber-Lyft business model simply is not working for drivers or riders. Empower has a different model. Empower provides drivers with software and support services that enable them to truly run their own businesses. Using our software, drivers set their own rates and get 100% of their hard-earned fares. Working for themselves using our software, TLC licensed drivers are making thousands of dollars more per month than they were making working for Uber or Lyft. At the same time, riders are saving money. Because drivers get 100% of what riders pay, instead of the 50% or often less paid by Uber or Lyft, drivers are able to charge riders less and still make more money. Riders love that drivers get 100% of what they pay. They also have the ability to request rides from their favorite drivers, which increases safety and a sense of community. Empower's customers have now provided over 20 million rides to over 600,000 riders, often serving some of the most historically underserved communities. Last week alone, over 10,000 drivers using our software and services provided over 500,000 rides to 150,000 riders. That includes over 100,000 rides in New York City, a number that is growing incredibly fast. Drivers are some of the hardest working folks in our community. And I was moved to start Empower by
Your time has
so many of them
expired.
telling me personally that they didn't feel that they mattered to the companies that they were working for. Outgoing TLC Chair David Doe understands
I'm
this
sorry,
and has joined
Mr.
Empower
Fear.
as Senior VP of Government and
I'm
Regulatory
going to
Affairs.
ask you to just wrap it up. Thank you.
Sure, I'm almost done. Thank you so much for giving me a few extra seconds. He, like myself, understands that drivers in New York City are tired of feeling unheard and disempowered. They want the ability to work for themselves. In fact, the freedom to do that is exactly why so many of them emigrated to this country, and New York City in particular, in the first place. Fortunately, the existing regulatory framework that was
Mr.
created by
Fear,
this council,
I'm sorry. Your time is up. Thank you so much for your testimony.
I appreciate it. I thank you, and I look forward to working with the Mamdani administration, Commissioner nominee Valdivia, the TLC, and the council to protect driver civil rights, including the right to work for oneself, to increase their earnings and ensure rider access to safe and affordable transportation services.
Mr. Salome and then Mr. Leon Johnson. Thank you.
You may begin.
I'm sorry. Good afternoon. My name is Zubin Soleimani. I'm a senior staff attorney at the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, and I'm speaking in support of the nomination of Midori Valdivia. I'll just say very quickly, we spent about 10 years challenging Uber's practice when it first came in of unlawfully passing on the cost of sales tax to its drivers, working with the AG to get a $328 million settlement for drivers. We're not excited about anybody new coming in who's not telling drivers that they're going to end up being on the hook for sales tax if they're not actually charging it, which I believe the gentleman's company is doing right now. But my main point of my testimony today is that moving forward, this agency needs leadership that respects the mandates that the council gave it to fix the oversaturation of FHVs that we'll remember led to 9 driver suicides. The council authorized TLC to do 2 things for driver pay and well-being in 2018. 1, regulate the number of cars on the road. 2, pass driver pay rules. Now, those 2 things work hand in hand. The pay rules only work on a per-trip basis. Even the best version of them ultimately means nothing if there are too many cars on the streets and drivers can't get enough trips. Despite this, the previous administration and Chair David Doe recklessly and unlawfully ignored its obligations to enforce the vehicle cap. Now, most disastrously, what they did was they unlawfully implemented a rule lifting the cap for electric vehicles, not by publishing a rule and holding a hearing or holding a vote, by announcing it at a press conference. We sued them in the Supreme Court of New York and joined that unlawful rule challenge, but not before TLC put out 10,000 new plates. That undid overnight years of progress that the TLC had made towards right-sizing the FHV fleet and bringing back driver incomes from the brink of oversaturation. Now, the result of that was as predictable as it was depressing. We ended up with an all-time high of number of cars on the road, while the trip numbers remained stagnant and didn't keep pace. What that means is less trips per driver and less pay per driver. So now we're back where we started in 2018. Moving forward, this TLC has to
Your
take
time
its
has expired.
responsibility to drivers. Thank you. I'll wrap up more seriously and commit to a transparent and data-guided approach to regulating the size of the fleet. Look at where they're actually needed, what the impact will be on driver income. They haven't taken it seriously. We look forward to a future in which we can work with Ms. Valdivia and a TLC that takes that responsibility more seriously. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Leon Johnson.
You may begin.
Yeah, hello. My name is Christopher Leon Johnson. Thank you, Chair Hung, for having this hearing. I totally support Mrs. Midori Valdivia for being the chair of the New York City New York City TLC 100%. I'll make this clear that I'm against congested pricing, but the one thing about congested pricing is that it actually lowered the amount of cars in the streets of New York. So I give her the credit for that. But I want to make it clear that the city, that this chair needs to be a chair where that she really stands up for the FAG driver, the taxi driver, more than the app, because the last chair stood more for the app than the driver. And I know that in the few months to come, we will have the unfair deactivations being made law, where you can't deactivate FHV driver without due process. But I hope that this chair really make it where that if the driver is justified in being reactivated, she actually helps the agencies reactivate that driver. Going forward, I'm calling on this chair, the incoming chair, to really push for the regulation of the apps, of all the apps, and come to the table with the deliveristas to make sure that these apps be regulated. I want to end this here that I support the nomination of the person to be part of the COIB. I'm not against that, but I support this nomination for the chair of the TLC. So I hope that she does well. I congratulate Mrs. Midori Badidia on her nomination, and I know she will do great for TLC, way better than David Doe, who actually didn't do anything who didn't do the right thing for the driver. So thank you so much. I'm gonna log off here, and okay, thank you.
Hi, I think we may have missed me. Am I able to? I had registered. Am I able to testify for 1 minute?
Sure.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name's Matt Doss. I the person who held this job at TLC longer than anybody in New York City history. I was approved by the council and twice. Served the TLC for 14 years. Worked for New York City government for over 20 years, and I'm here representing the International Association of Transportation Regulators. We're a nonprofit group that represents TLC commissioners and ride-hail commissioners all over the world. And TLC has been a member for years, and I've known Midori for a very long time, at least more than 10 to 15 years, and in a lot of capacities. And she's got, from someone who's done the job for almost a decade, she has all the skill sets needed. You know, as Ira had mentioned, you know, her ability to listen to others, her depth of experience is unlike any chair, including myself. When I took the job, she has probably the most multimodal experience, which is really important because I know the council had some questions about her serving on the MTA board. That is a good thing. Remember, the New York City DOT commissioner was on the board for many years. The problem that we have around the country and in New York City, especially, and around the world, is that there's disjointed governance of transportation. It's an ecosystem. All the modes, public transit, the port authority, they all should be working together with TLC. TLC should have a seat at the table. So whether it's Midori or somebody else, she's going to do a great job, in my opinion. Very excited, and I fully support her. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my good friend, Wayne Hawley, who testified earlier. I've known Wayne for over 20 to 30 years. He was a hands-on person at the conflicts board who probably knows the law better than anybody else, and really was very helpful when I was commissioner at TLC in keeping the staff ethical and trained. And I fully support his nomination too. And I submitted written testimony. Pat Gatling is there, the former human rights commissioner, who submitted it in person, which goes into more detail about what ITR does, and some more details about why I support her. So thanks for the opportunity. If there's anything else needed from me, I could be reached at mdoss@ietr.global. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Has anybody else signed up for in-person testimony that has not yet testified? Is anybody else online that has signed up for testimony that has not testified? Good. Okay. Well, seeing no other members of the public sign up to speak, the public hearing on the nomination of Mr. Wayne Hawley and Midori Valdivia are now closed. This concludes today's business. I would like to thank the candidates, the member of the committee staff, the sergeant at arms, and the member of the public for their participation in today's meeting. The meeting of the Committee of Rules, Privileges, Elections, Standard, and Ethics is now adjourned. Thank you.